What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 666. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, fresh off of a work lunch, we'll call it, Luis?
Yeah, I got to catch up with Juan, the social media manager for Channel Fireball, who is awesome, and his husband, and it was super cool to get to see them. Me and Gabby got to have lunch with them.
Yeah, Juan's hilarious. Just some of the stuff he's done on like the Twitter and stuff for CFP. I'm like, wow, like that is really good. It takes a certain type of mind, to come up with those things. And I hope Juan's doing well. Haven't seen him in a few years. But yeah, Luis, you're fresh off your lunch, but you're ready to rumble on the rare and mythic rare set review for Dominaria United. Are you not?
Oh, I certainly am.
I knew you would. I knew you would be. We're going to get into some interesting takes that Luis has on the rares in the set as well, and we'll get those as well as go over every single one of them in this episode of LR. First, let's talk about our sponsors, channelfireball.com. You should check them out for all things Magic related. They've got a marketplace for singles as well as sealed product. And of course, you can check out CFB Pro if you'd like to try to up your game and get yourself ready. There's the pro scene is back. There's qualifiers happening for regional championships. There's pro tours on the horizon. They're still a few months out, but they'll be here before you know it. And you're going to want to brush up if you haven't been out to the local shop to try to beat up on the locals and pick yourself up some qualifying slots. CFB Pro is a great way to get up to speed on whatever format it is that you need to play. Make sure that you check them out while you're over there at Channel Fireball. And of course, the show is also brought to you by FTX. That's a place to manage your digital assets and in some case non-digital assets as well. You can head over to ftx.com if you live outside the United States, and ftx.us within the United States is a safe, regulated place to manage assets of these types. I want to remind you, though, if you are looking to get into that, it is a form of investment and that carries risk. That means that you need to consult an investment professional before doing investing of any kind. But when you're ready, FTX is ready for you. Make sure you check them out. They've got a great app for your phone and a website. You can use both simultaneously, and make sure that you're up to date on all of your digital asset needs over at FTX. Now, Luis, we're going to cover every single rare and mythic rare here, but we are going to be giving them grades. So why don't you tell them how we do grades?
All right. We have an A through F grading scale with 2 subgrades. The A's are bombs, game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind, and overall just the best cards in the set. You're going to see a lot of A's in the rare and mythic review, though less in this set than in most. We'll get to that. Sanctuary Warden, Arbiter of the All-Seeing. These are examples of some A's. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors. These are kind of the headliners for the set. Cards that give you a reason to be in a specific color or combination of colors, as well as some really good premium removal. Cards like Corpse Appraiser and Lagrilla. C's are playables that kind of make up the bulk of your deck. They're the pawns of limited, fairly interchangeable, and you end up playing a fair amount of them. So these are cards like Backup Agent, Echo Inspector, Glamorous Outlaw. Not a ton of C's in the rares, but again, we'll see. D's are sometimes playable. You'd prefer not to run them. These are cards that are kind of mediocre, that when they make the cut, you feel a little bad that you had to run them. Cards like Dapper Shieldmate or High Rise Sawjack from the last set. And F's are unplayable in virtually all scenarios, cards that cost 1 million mana or do something really hyper-specific. A lot of rares end up falling into the F category, especially in this set. Cards like Evolving Door. And then 2 subgrades. One is sideboard, cards that don't make the main deck but can be good out of the sideboard. Not that many rares end up in this space either. And then Build Around. These are cards that by themselves aren't good enough, but if you enable them with the right kind of team around them, can be very good. And rares actually do typically have a fair amount of these. So those are our grades, and we'll see how many cards fit into those categories.
All right, we're going to start with blue, which is where we started the commons and uncommon show for this set after we did the gold signpost. There are no such equivalents for rares, however, when it comes to the gold cards. So instead, we're just going to start with blue. And our first card out is Academy Lore Master. This is blue for a 2/3 human wizard at rare. And it says at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player may draw an additional card. If they do, spells they cast this turn cost 2 more to cast.
So I actually like this card. I think this card can be quite potent in the right deck. The main drawback with this card is you play it, they get the first extra card, right? They choose to draw an extra card, and then they kill your Academy Lore Master and you're just down a card. Mm-hmm. So that ends up being quite bad for you. Where this card is good is if you have a deck with a lot of cheap spells and or instants, and you're able to kind of make use of the asymmetrical effect by getting extra cards, but still being able to play your cards.
Yeah, it's weird because what I usually find with cards like this is that they're hard to figure out if they're good or not, right? Or when they would be good. So when I see them early, I don't take them and I try to like make other people beat me with them, or try to see them on the battlefield and go, okay, I get it. That's where that card's really good. And that makes sense. If you can break the symmetry, then this is the type of thing you want. The interesting thing about this card is that it puts a wrinkle on a card that's actually been around since Alpha, right? Which is Howling Mine. We even call these Howling Mine effects or whatever, ones that allow players to draw an extra card per turn. Now, the knock on cards like Howling Mine or those type of effects is that you're the one that paid a card out of your hand and the mana for it to enable both players to get this ability. This throws a really cool monkey wrench in, though, in that you actually get a game piece for it, right? You get a 2/3 vanilla creature that's a little bit difficult to cast for it. How does that offset the fact that like they're the one that gets the card first and you're the one that hadn't spent a card to do it?
Oh, getting the 2/3 is nice. It's certainly quite relevant. And what you end up with is if they don't kill it, and that's a big if. Like you play against someone who's shown you 2 lightning strikes and a cut down, you just want to take this card out of your deck, especially since those cards are instants and cheap, so they can just kill it on your upkeep. If you play this against someone who's got all sorcery speed cards and not tons of ways to remove it, which some decks definitely fall into this category, like playing this against like the 5-color deck can be pretty effective because you can end up in a deck where you've got Essence Scatter and Impulse and Shadow Prophecy, maybe just cards with flash, where you're drawing an extra card but still not really getting slowed down by it, and they have to choose: do I draw an extra card and make a worse play, or do I just not draw an extra card? In which case, this card is just very, very good for you. So,
okay,
I have started by playing this card in my like heavy blue decks with lots of instants, and generally been satisfied. But again, I do take it out if they have a lot of removal. That's the main drawback. Okay,
so lots of instants and cheap spells that you can actually deploy are kind of what you want to lean into if you're going to play an Academy Lore Master. Do you consider this a build around? Would you put this into any blue deck?
I wouldn't go so far as to call it a build around, but it's like a half build around. I think you can give it a normal grade. I would give Academy Lore Master a B-. I've actually been impressed by it. Like, there have been games where it's good. You play against, like if you play against red-white aggro and you play this on turn 2, on their turn 3, they can't really get the extra card because they need to play a creature. And then on your turn, you take the extra card, you play that, and you pass, and you Essence Scatter their next play, or Lightning Strike one of their creatures. Like, you're doing well for yourself. And in the late game, it can kind of fall off because when they have 6 mana out or 8 mana out, then they're always just going to get a card and then maybe kill this. But I don't know. Overall, it's been decent. So I would give Academy Lore Master a B-, but just be aware there's a lot of play with this card.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to follow your lead on that one because I haven't yet played with the card myself, and it's a very difficult one to grade. Good, that was interesting. Next is Silver Scrutiny. This is blue X for a sorcery. You may cast Silver Scrutiny as though it had flash if X is 3 or less, and you draw X cards.
I think this card is okay, but I don't think it's amazing.
It's low on efficiency, right?
Basically, what's going to end up happening with this card is if you can get the game to a point where you can cast this for X equals like 3 or 4, you're going to feel pretty good about the fact that you just chittered a turn for a whole handful of new cards. But you're just not always in that position.
Yes.
And this format has some really cool long game decks that go pretty deep, and this can be very valuable. But there's some matchups where this is going to be one of the first cards you sideboard out, for example.
Yeah, I think that this actually has similar setup to the Academy Lore Master, where you'd like to have a bunch of cheap reactive stuff so that you can Lightning Strike, Essence Scatter, kind of keep the board clear, and then, fire off a big Silver Scrutiny for some amount, where you can actually take that turn off and then untap and leverage the cards that you've gotten. What's the best way to leverage the cards that you've gotten? If they're cheap, right? If you can actually cast one or two of them then that turn or the next turn. So I would lean on cards like that. And then I would run a Silver Scrutiny. If I'm running just like a random, 3-color blue-green base deck or something like that, I'm less interested in this. Like, to me, this falls into the category of I'm never going to get it because somebody else is going to take it higher than me anyway.
Yeah, I think that is generally the case. Like your good blue-red tempo decks will play this, but they're not. They're not going to take this over a card that affects the board for the most part. And this
Yeah.
is not really what you want in your 5-color decks. Your
Right.
5-color decks have already paid mana costs and inefficiencies by playing tap lands and playing 3-mana ramp spells in the early game. They don't then need an expensive card draw spell. What they need is something like Prayer of Binding, right, which removes something and gains 2 life, or
Yes.
the Bone Rattler, the 6-mana 4/4 that gets a creature back into play. Like that's the sort of stuff you need when you're playing these 5-color decks.
Yeah, I think one shortcut too is like compare this card to Phyrexian Espionage, which is the divination variant, for the set. 3 mana, draw 2,
Right.
and it has a kicker. I mean, in many, many, many scenarios, you'd much rather just have Phyrexian Espionage. Right.
You
It's
just playing 3 mana to draw 2 cards right
Right.
away, and then at 5 mana you're still getting the 3 card. You're drawing 2 and they're discarding 1, which is the same card advantage as Silver Scrutiny for 3.
Yeah. So that's a good way to look at it. I would have Scrutiny as a C or a C plus. I have yet to find a reason to prioritize it. I'll also say that in sets that have inherent card advantage on cards that you want to play anyway, like cards with kicker or sets with kicker and things like that, pure card draw goes down in value, and this is one of those sets for me. There are plenty of 2-for-1s to be had off of your creatures and other things that affect the board, and that doesn't mean that you don't ever play pure card draw, but it's less of a priority.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think C plus B minus is probably about right for Silver Scrutiny. It's just usually not your first priority.
Yeah, exactly. And then somebody's going to take it that doesn't listen to the podcast. Next is Vodalian Hexcatcher. This is, man, every time I open this and I'm in blue, I'm like, ooh. And then like, oh, that stupid thing. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flash Merfolk wizard. It gives your other Merfolk +1/+1, and you can sacrifice a Merfolk to counter a non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. It's just not a thing in the format. Like there's a few other Merfolk somewhere, but it doesn't play out that way.
One of the things that's kind of annoying to me about this set is there's a cycle of rares, one of each color, that's tribal and just not supported. They're just all for constructed. So,
Right.
I mean, but I think Hexcatcher is an F. It's not even a build around.
Right.
And that's the same is going to be true when we get to the other tribal ones here.
Yeah. So it's kind of sad, but it is an F. Next is Ether Channeler. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/1 human wizard at rare. And when it enters the battlefield, and by the way, I'm really upset about this card. Choose one. You create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. You draw a card. You get to pick one of these, or you return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand.
All right. I mean, it sounds like it's all the things you like doing.
Yeah, it is. But I tweeted about this when I first saw the card, and I tweeted the Godfather, look how they massacred my boy. I mean, Man of War, like distant memory at this. I mean, we've already had versions of cards that were better, but this is just ludicrous now, right? Like you can get a 2/1 and a 1/1 flyer, or you can just have it straight up cantrip if you need a card, or okay, fine, you can't bounce your own stuff, but you can bounce any non-land permanent with it. Like this card's insane. I mean, admittedly it's a rare, but yes, if you just showed me this card, if would I say I loved it? Absolutely. I'm a little bitter about how much it's blanked my beloved Man of War. But at any rate, Ether Channeler is fantastic. I mean, this is everything I've ever wanted in a card. Like, this is it. They peaked. Like, I don't need anything more than that. If I won the world championship, that would be my face on that card. Like that, I would be like, that's the one I would pitch that card to them, and they would say, well, we can't do that. Like, that's just too much, but here it is in front of us. What do you think about it?
Oh, I mean, it's a great card. It's so flexible. It's always going to be good. There's never a time when you're going to draw this and be unhappy, right? That said, you do only get to choose one mode. This is not a bomb rare. I would say it's like Agreed. A solid B.
Yes.
You're really happy. You're always going to take Ether Channeler and play it. Most of the time, it's going to be like a play out, kind of like a good uncommon. Yeah,
I have it at B+. Like, I think that the flexibility does bump it slightly, but agreed. This is this would be like a Mythic uncommon level card. Next is Haughty Djinn. This is 1 blue for a star 4 flying Djinn, and its power is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, and instants and sorceries you cast 1 less to cast. Very powerful card. The blue-red deck absolutely sings with a card like this, where it can just deploy multiple cards per turn, multiple cantrips to fill up the yard, keep the action flowing. And you get this really cheap, high toughness flyer out of it that eventually just gets huge on the front end too.
Oh yeah, this card's been fantastic for me. Just
too.
The cost reduction leads to these efficient turns. It's often just a 2/4 about right at the start and just can be even better later. So fantastic card.
Yeah, I have Haughty Djinn at A. You do need to have some build around to it. So if you throw it just in like a totally random green-blue deck with only a few instants and sorceries, it will not perform at that level. But I'm kind of assuming that you're nudging your deck towards it, or God forbid, actually building around it like in blue-red, and in which case it performs. It's going to be one of your best cards.
For sure. I would say Haughty Djinn's an A.
Yeah. Vidalian Mind Singer is next. It's 1 blue for a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard. Here's your combo, right? And it has kicker for 1 in a red and or 1 in a green. And it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters for each time it was kicked. And when it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature with power less than Vidalian Mind Singer's power for as long as you control Vidalian Mind Singer. Wow.
Yeah,
I haven't played it with this yet, but
I've had this a couple times and it's been fantastic every time. I mean, it's a giant sower of temptation where if they don't kill this or Illithid Mind Flayer, whatever is the more recent one, where whenever you play one of these creatures and they don't kill it, you basically just win because you have 2 creatures and they have none. This is, a blue-red or blue-green card. You don't need to be both. You do need to be able to kick it with at least one of the abilities. Otherwise, you're gonna run into some issues. But for the most part, I think this card is just excellent. I would give Mindsinger an A.
Yeah, it might even be an A+. I mean, like these are 3-for-1s. Like when the way that they play out, they kill a thing, they get you a thing, and they get you another thing, all for one card. These are absurd, and this one can be huge. A 4/4 or a 6/6 potentially. Like that's incredible. Let's just go A on Vidalian Mindsinger, but that is amazing. The phasing of Zhalfir. This is an interesting one. So it's 2 blue for a saga. It has read ahead, and the first 2 chapters are the same. And they read, another target non-land permanent phases out. It can't phase in for as long as you control phasing of Zhalfir. So it gets rid of something for chapter 1 and or 2. Chapter 3, though, is destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token.
So this card's really interesting because it has read ahead, so you can choose, do you want this to be a wrath that replaces all creatures with 2/2s? Do you want to phase something out for 2 turns or 1 turn and then wrath? How do you want to play this card? I don't think it's fantastic, but there are situations where it can be quite strong. So I think a really common way to play this will be to play it on chapter 2, phase out your best creature. On their turn, they can attack you with everything because it's all going to turn into 2/2s. Maybe you do some blocks, maybe not. And then this destroys everything except your best creature, which then comes back in.
Right.
So it won't come back in until the turn after. So it'll be phased out. You'll untap it. Can't come back because phasing Zhalfir is in play. Then chapter 3 happens. It blows everything up. Your creature's still not back yet. It'll be back on your next turn.
Oh, how does that part work? Because
it phases out, and phasing happens before your turn.
I see. Gotcha.
But so there's not like a window for it to come back after the phasing of Zhalfir goes away until your next turn.
That makes sense, right? And it's just that now that phasing of Zhalfir is gone, it can phase back in, but it doesn't until it would normally. Which
right. It's not like Parallax Wave, which immediately returns the creature or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, this card seems like it has some potentially powerful setups, but that it is very difficult to set up. Like, is there a world where you just play this on one, phase out a thing, get in a big attack, phase out one of their things, get in a big attack, phase out another one of their things on your next turn, and then just kill them? Like, can you use this offensively?
I mean, you can try. If it doesn't work, then all of a sudden all your creatures turn into 2/2s, and their 2 best things are going to come back immediately on their turn.
So you have to know that you're going to win if you're going to take that route.
Yeah. So
extremely high risk. Yeah. It feels like the setup, like just I haven't played this card yet because I keep passing it because I don't think it's good. But the reason I don't think it's good is because it feels like the setup cost is too high.
Yeah, this card is powerful and does some pretty wild things. Clearly, there are going to be some games where this card is excellent. The question is that the average game? How many times when you draw this, is it going to be the card you want or a good card? And the answer, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
So I'm not confident that this card is good. This is still a little bit of a wait and see for me. If I give it a grade right now, it would be like a C.
Yeah, I would give it an F right now. That's my read on it, but I am very willing to have that change if needed. But I'm going to start there. I just think my gut tells me that this card is not where you want to be.
Yeah, that's fair.
Vesuvian Duplimancy is next. What does this thing do? It's a mythic.
It's a 3 and a blue for a mythic enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. So basically, all your single targeted effects, or spells rather, copy your creatures when you target them. So not great to target your creatures with removal, though you could lightning strike a 4/4 and get some value.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up in a spot where it's a total build around. I mean, to the surprise of no one, we're giving this a build around grade.
Yeah, but there's two really great blue commons that work with this, which is Timely Interference and Shore Up.
Yep.
Right? Like these are things that, if you target your own card with Timely Interference, it's fine. You get a card back and it doesn't really hurt much. And Shore Up is, meant to target your own cards. And I don't know. The question is, can you make a consistently good deck if you put Vesuvian Duplimancy into your deck? And then let's say you have 2 to 3 each of Shore Up and Timely Interference. Is your deck on average going to be good? Because the times when you don't draw the Duplimancy, you're sitting on a bunch of like Shore Ups or whatever, which isn't really where you want to be, generally speaking. Though it is a playable, it's not like disastrous.
Yeah, I think this is a build around A.
Okay.
It's just so good when it works, and if you get this early, you can tailor your deck around it.
It is ludicrous to get going, right? I mean, it even lets you get around the legendary stuff. Like,
yeah, no, it's completely fantastic once you get going. And
okay,
I think overall, it's the card you do really want to see early, so you can build around it.
All right, build around A for Vesuvian Duplimancy, and I really want to go off with that. Defiler of Dreams is 3 blue for a Phyrexian Sphinx. It is rare. It's a 4/3 flyer, so 5 mana 4/3 flyer. As an additional cost to cast blue permanent spells, by the way, this is part of a cycle as well, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost blue less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of blue mana you pay. Whenever you cast a blue permanent spell, draw a card. So there, you'll see that same idea. And basically what these cards let you do is turn one of the color of mana that they are into a Phyrexian mana. So it makes it by 1 cheaper mana-wise, but you do have to pay the 2 life to do that if you want. And then they pay you back by whenever casting a blue or a red, green, whichever color it is, permanent spell, then you get a bonus from that as well. This one draws you a card, and it's already tacked onto a 4/3 flyer for 5, which is notable in that 3 toughness is an inflection point in the set with Lightning Strike and the black removal spell that you can kick, and it counts your cards in graveyard as often -3/-3. So this is a little bit more vulnerable with that toughness bump, or toughness nerf, but still, these cards have been really powerful. Like they allow you to do some pretty busted turns, and they pay you for doing the thing that you want to do anyway, which is just cast your spells.
Yeah, they're all fantastic. This is one of the better ones.
Yeah.
But really, when you see one of the Defilers, you should take it if you're in those colors, or if you're undecided on colors, and then try to play some permanents to go with that color. I mean, that's not too tough. I mean, Defiler Dream gets an A. They're all, newsflash, they're all A's, and in some cases A pluses.
Yeah, easy A for Defiler Dreams. What about Sphinx of Clear Skies?
Even better somehow. It's 3 blue for 5/5 flying ward 2. So pretty hard to kill or block. And it has Domain. When it does combat damage to a player, reveal the top X cards of your library, or X number of basic land types you control. the opponent separates those cards into two piles. You put one in your hand and the other in your graveyard. So let's say you had two land types. Well, they get to look at the top two cards and put them into each pile of one, and you can choose the better one. If you have 4 land types, it's probably going to be like 2/2 or maybe 3/1. Either way, this is drawing you at least one card no matter what happens, and usually giving you either some selection or more cards. Plus, it's a 5/5 flying ward too. I mean, this might be the best card in the set. It's an A+.
It is an A+. I love this card. I've had the very good fortune of opening it twice already, and it is an absolute house. And don't sleep on the stats too, because that's sort of the factor fictioning part of it is really awesome. But a 5/5 flying ward 2 for 5 is it's almost like it ends the game too quickly. You're like, right. Oh, but I wanted to do the flipping the pile thing again. It's like, yeah, well, I ran out of life total because your Sphinx killed me. So sorry. A+ for Sphinx of Clear Skies. That's for blue. Any overall thoughts on blue? I mean, a couple of pretty big misses in there.
Yeah, I mean, the blue has some great rares. I mean, between Defiler, Sphinx, Mindsinger, and Haughty Djinn, I don't think it can really complain. But Brilliant Hexcatcher, look, every color gets that whammy, so it's not the end of the world. All
right, let's see what black has in store for us. The first card up is called Evolved Sleeper, and this is black for a 1/1 human. So just a normal human rare. And it's got 3 different activated abilities. And this is kind of playing off of a long-term cycle of cards going back quite a ways. So this is how it works. You can pay black to have it become a human cleric with base power and toughness 2/2. Then you can pay 1 and a black. And if it is a cleric, so in other words, you can't skip steps here is kind of the idea. Put a death touch counter on it, and it becomes a Phyrexian human cleric with base power and toughness 3/3. So black for a 1/1, you can pay an additional black to make it a 2/2, an additional 1 and a black to make it a 3/3 death touch. The last one is 1 black. If it's a Phyrexian, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then you draw a card and lose 1 life. And the interesting part about that is you can do that over and over again.
Oh yeah, this card is a huge threat going long, and it also attacks pretty efficiently in the early game too.
Mm-hmm. You can find a place to put that extra mana or 2 in there and get yourself a 3/3 death toucher that's slamming. But if it's late in the game and you have like 5-6 mana and enough black, you can just be like, play this, level it up, go. And then on your turn, you can be like, level it up, draw a card, level it up again, draw a card, hit you, right? And the thing's getting absolutely massive. Because remember, it was a 3/3. And then if you did the last thing, it's a 4/4. And you start drawing cards and losing life, but it's 5/5, 6/6, and you're filling up your hand as well. It becomes a little kind of an activated Phyrexian arena at some point. I have yet to play with it, but I faced it down multiple times, and it's just awesome. It's terrifying. It demands removal. It is absolutely a great place to put removal. It also doesn't have a restriction on when you can activate these abilities, which is really powerful. We've seen some versions of this type of thing pop up before where it's only on sorcery speed, but this thing you can just kind of do it whenever you want. Really strong card.
Yeah. Evolved Sleeper is fantastic. Just give this one an A as well.
I think so too. It's just good at all points in the game. Next is Shadow Rite Priest. This is 1 and a black for a 2/2 human cleric at rare. It says other clerics you control get +1/+1. So here's our tribal plant here. And it's 3 black for tap it and sacrifice another cleric to search your library for a black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle.
This one's a little better than the average one in this cycle because it's, first of all, 2 mana 2/2. So it's already starting out all right. There are a couple clerics running around. And if you can sack a cleric and get a good black creature, like that's not too bad either. So it's definitely a card that I would, on average, play in my black decks, but not a card I'm really going to go after. It's kind of like a C.
Yeah. And just, there's 3 common clerics and there's 3 uncommon clerics. And then there's another rare cleric besides this one. So they're all in black and white. One of them's actually black and white. So yeah, I agree. C-ish, C+. I mean, if the more you build around it, the better it gets, the better targets you have. It search for any black creature. So it doesn't have to be a cleric that you search for. If you have some big bomb, hey, this is getting quite a bit better. So
yeah, I wouldn't consider this build around as much as a card that might fit nicely into your deck. Don't take this early and try to make your deck around it.
Right. It's a free roll. It's a 2/2 for 2 that has actually a fairly significant upside if you get lucky and you're built around. Next card is called Stronghold Arena. This one's 1 and a black for an enchantment, and it has a kicker of either or I should say green and white. So you can either add a green or a white, or a green and a white mana to it. And when it enters a battlefield, you gain 3 life for each time it was kicked. And then it says, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value.
I mean, this is a fine card if you're good and aggressive. You have to have a lot of creatures. Like, where I see this fitting is mostly in like black-white, when you have a lot of curve, maybe some token making, all that sort of thing.
What do you think of? Yeah, because the issue, right, is that it's either a black-white, a black-green, or a black-green-white card. It's kind of hard to wedge blue in there, where you would have like the more evasive threats at common.
Well, you don't need black or green or white for the card to be playable.
It's true. It is true. You're only getting life out of it. So that's true. You could just put it in blue-black and just, take the pain.
Yeah, I mean, the life is not mandatory for this card to be solid. So
you're right.
I basically think this is like a build around B, where if you're aggressive, have a lot of evasion, then, or going wide, this card can be good. Note it only triggers once, even if you hit them with 5 creatures. But still, you don't need this to trigger multiple times a turn for it to be good. If you're triggering it once a turn, it can still be pretty good.
Also worth noting, it is a May ability, but once you commit, you're paying the iron price. Like the May isn't look at the card and then decide if you'd like to pay the life and keep it. It's, do you want to look at the card? Because if you do, it's going in your hand and you're taking the hit. So make sure that you're cognizant of that as well. Because these type of cards obviously flop really hard in like race situations and things like that, where you can just take a big hit of 3 or 4 damage out of nowhere. So what grade did you give it?
I would give it a build around B. I mean, I think it's got legs, but it's not the best card ever.
Yeah, it's a cool card. What about the Raven Man?
Been kind of unimpressed with this one. This is 1 and a black for a 2/1 legendary human wizard. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card, create a 1/1 black bird token with flying, and this creature can't block. The being unable to block part is really what I think is a drawback here. And then it also has 3 and a black tap. Each opponent discards a card, activate as a sorcery. So it's a 2-mana 2/1 that you can pay 4 and tap it and make them discard a card. And at the end of the turn, you get a bird as a result. That is just not that good.
There was a time when this would be the type of card that I'd get really excited about. But I feel like limited is way too on the board now, way too like I'm getting value, I'm doing things, I'm pushing my game plan forward. That the idea of sorcery speed, 4 mana, tap one of my creatures, like this, like take it out of combat for the entire turn cycle, blocking or attacking, and just dump 4 mana into you choosing which card you'd like to discard that's the worst one from your hand. I can't imagine being happy about that. Like,
yeah, it's not really conducive to what you do in limited these days, unfortunately. So no. I would give Raven Man a C+. Like, you still play it as a 2-drop that can do some interesting stuff, but for the most part, I just don't think the card is particularly good.
Yeah, I'd give Raven Man a C. Like, it has a little bit of application, but any time that you actually activate that ability, I have to guess that you're just behind at that point. You've just put yourself behind kind of voluntarily. What about Braid's Arisen Nightmare?
This is a 1 black for a legendary nightmare. It's a 3/3 at rare. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. So any permanent type. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a type with it. For each opponent who doesn't sacrifice, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So you get to sack whatever you want, and if they don't match you, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. Now, they're not obliged to sacrifice. If you play this turn 3 and sack a land, your opponent's going to be like, okay, you can draw an extra card, you're down a land. But on the other hand, it does really do good work if you have permanent types they don't have, or you have a way to sack something that gives you value. You sack a soldier token, and they either let you cash it in for a card and they lose 2 life, or they sack a real creature.
So if you sack one that they don't have, then they're forced to just let you to lose a life and you draw the card?
Yes, if they don't have an option there.
Okay. So you want expendable stuff to feed to Braids. Also, Braids is interesting just being a 3/3 for 3, right? You can, like, it's in black, you can start slamming with it too.
Yeah, I mean, Braids is just a relatively strong card overall because you don't have to use the ability if you don't want to. And if you do use the ability, you usually get some pretty good value out of it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I think overall it's a card I'm interested in playing and have been impressed with so far.
Yeah, I like that. I haven't yet to play with the card, but I totally would. Interesting also because the card that Braids is based on it did not give you the choice. Like, it was a totally different dynamic, where you would eventually sacrifice Braids to herself. But at any rate, B plus for Braids?
I like B for Braids. Like, you're not going to get like massive amounts of value, but the ability is worth either an extra card or forcing them into uneven trades. Both those tend to be fine. You can put this into any deck and it's okay, but obviously it does get better if you're if you're really trying to maximize it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a really cool design too. All right, one of my favorite planeswalkers ever, Liliana of the Veil, is back. This is 1 black for a 3 loyalty legendary planeswalker, Liliana at Mythic Rare. +1, each player discards a card. -2, target player sacrifices a creature. And -6, separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. One of the templating errors over the time. Everybody always picks the pile that they want to keep. And if you happen to do that online, you will find out the hard way that the pile that you're choosing is the one that you're actually going to sacrifice. But at any rate, card-wise, I love Liliana of the Veil. This card's sweet.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a very strong card, and definitely will make some waves in Standard, but as well as playing pretty well in Limited. I do think people tend to overrate it a little bit because this card has been like a modern powerhouse, right, for so long.
Yeah. And
in Limited, it's I think fairly worse because players have more creatures in general. The +1's less, it's more symmetrical because in Modern you build these decks where the +1's really bad for them and fine for you, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So I think overall Liliana is like a B, but look, a lot of the times you're going to play this, you're going to -2, they're going to lose their worst creature, and then they're either going to get to attack it or not, and it's not like it sits there, generating massive value or anything.
That's right. I mean, that's the key is that you want to create asymmetry with +1. Each player discards a card, and that's hard to do, especially like this format doesn't have flashback, right? It's not like super graveyard centric in that way. That's kind of how you can get ahead is, I discard a flashback spell, you discard a real spell, I flash stuff back and keep the train rolling. But yeah, I like B for Liliana of the Veil. It's still powerful, still going to draw a lot of attention, but it just isn't a devastating long-term planeswalker like some of them are. Defiler of Flesh is next. This is 2 black for a 4/4 Phyrexian Horror at Rare, and it has Menace. And this is the cycle of the ones that make your spells cheaper, your permanents cheaper. So this one lets you do that with black. You can basically substitute a black mana with a Phyrexian mana if you'd like. And the payoff, though, is whenever you cast a black permanent spell, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains Menace until end of turn.
4/4 Menace for 4 that has additional upsides attached. Yeah, I mean, this is very good. This is probably the weakest Defiler, if I had to guess, but
I think so.
But it's still quite strong.
A- or A? Yeah, it's still
I would
great.
give Defiler of Flesh an A-.
Sure. A-. I mean, you're just getting such a great body. 4/4 Menace for 4 is already just a big problem. And then, especially if you're turning things sideways, start adding to the board and you're slamming in there with everything and the game ends really quickly. So great card. Another one in that line. It's just a very powerful lineup, mainly because they push the body. Like the ability is quite strong, but they really made it so that like you don't even need to use it to make these cards good. Drag to the Bottom is next. It's 2 black for a sorcery. It's rare. It says Domain. Each creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. So here's a somewhat conditional sweeper. But boy, if you can, you're already getting spotted 1, and you're going to have 2 in basically every deck. So drag to the bottom reads 2 black, everything gets -3/-3 until it turn kind of as a baseline. And then if you're going to domain around a little bit, you can get it to -4/-4. And if, of course, you go for the full, then, it becomes basically an unconditional sweeper or a full sweeper at -5 or even -6/-6.
Yeah, I mean, it really does what you want these cards to do, which is kills everything, but you also have the ability, if you have to, you can modulate how many lands you have in play to the point where you maybe don't end up getting your 5/5 killed.
Right.
But it generally will do the job you need it to do.
And it's only 4 mana. So like if you're facing an opponent with that really quick start where they go like 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, you can drag to the bottom on turn 4 and actually just get all of those most of the time, which is also great, because that is a common scenario in Limited, and having the sweeper at the 4 mana slot, that's why that's important, so that you can reset the early curve out that your opponent did and actually get a 2-for-1 or even a 3-for-1 out of it. Where if the sweeper costs 5, that's a lot harder to set up without taking like a huge amount of damage. So I really like drag to the bottom. I mean, you got to be in the market for a sweeper, but like, yeah, this is the type of card that can really crush and turn around a game that you might have been losing.
Yeah, I would give drag to the bottom an A. It's just also really easy to build around it.
It is. The domain stuff has been very attainable. So there you go. A for drag to the bottom. Next is Sheoldred the Apocalypse. This is 2 black for a 4/5 legendary Phyrexian Praetor at Mythic. And it has Death Touch. So 4 mana, 4/5 Death Touch. And it says, whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. And whenever your opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life.
Just an absurd card. I mean, 4 mana, 4/5 Death Touch is already just a huge brawler. But the fact is, the ability means that every turn cycle, if nothing's happening, they're losing 2, you're gaining 2. And it punishes their card draw while rewarding yours. I mean, Sheoldred's an A+. Like, you don't have to do anything but cast this card, and it delivers.
Yep, and I have been on the wrong end. I've never been on the right end of this card, but I've been on the wrong end of it multiple times, and it just felt impossible. Because what it really challenges you to do is to race, right? You're like, okay, well, I got to get this. Either the longer this goes, the worse it is for me, so I got to close the door on this game. And you just can't. The 2 life baseline gained per turn from them is already hard enough. And then occasionally they'll draw an extra card for a little bit more, and you're like, okay. And then on top of it, your life total's plummeting. Like, you take 2 from this, plus they can, crash in with their 4/5 Death Touch that's hard to block and interact with, and you lose the game right quick. So yeah, A+ for Sheoldred the Apocalypse. That's got to be one of the better rares in the whole set. Last black rare is called the Cruelty of Gix. It is 3 black for a saga at rare. It's got read ahead, and it has chapter 1. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a creature or planeswalker card from it. That player discards that card. Okay, on 5 mana, sure. You're probably going to nab like something pretty good at that point. Chapter 2 is search your library for a card. Put that card into your hand, then shuffle. You lose 3 life, but you can get anything. And then chapter 3 is put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control.
Yep, black gets another A+. Cruelty of Gix is just not a beatable card under most circumstances. If you play this and you're under pressure, you can just go straight to chapter 3 and get the best creature from either graveyard into play. But that's like among the worst case scenarios. The best case scenario is you play it, take their best creature, then you get to tutor for your best card, and then you get to put their best creature into play.
When you put it like that, it's ludicrous. Yeah.
I mean,
Cruelty
the card
of
is
Gix
just
is
ludicrous.
incredible. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks like A+ territory to me.
Yep, A+, and black did pretty well for itself as a result.
It really did. Let's move on to red and see if it can do the same. First card out is called Shivan Devastator, and it's red X for a mythic dragon Hydra. It's a 0/0 with flying and haste, and it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So they kept it really simple with this one. We've seen sort of green versions of dragons and hydras and stuff like this where you pay X plus a color and then that's how big the thing is. But this one has flying and haste as well.
Yeah, I mean, this card is just... It's as big as you need it to be at basically every point. For the most part, you don't want to cast it until X is going to be 3 or 4, and ideally more. But the fact is, you just have the ability. I actually had someone go turn 2 Baird, the red-white legend, where if you have a creature bigger than its base stats, you get a token. Turn 3 Sheevan Devastator, attack for 2, get a token in a turn.
Wow.
I was like, all right, that's kind of impressive.
Yeah, that's really good. I agree, though. 3 mana is nice, or 4 mana, so 3/3 is nice. 4/4 is like going to be really problematic again because of the removal thing that we said. But if you can curve out otherwise, yeah, save this thing for last. Get yourself a 6/6 or a 5/5. Yeah,
I would give Sheevan Devastator an A. It's just always a fantastic card.
Yeah, really awesome. Next is Radha's Firebrand. This is 1 and a red for a 3/1 human warrior at rare. And whenever it attacks, target creature defending player controls with power less than Radha's power can't block this turn. Also, slight note, can't block at all. It's not just block Radha, just can't block at all. And then it has Domain for 5 and a red. Radha's Firebrand gets +2/+2 until end of turn. But this ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control, and you can only do this once per turn. So again, assuming that you're a 2-color deck, you're already getting spotted 2 of the mana here, so it's actually 4 mana to give her +2/+2. But then if you build towards it at all, you can get that down, even less. This is one of those cards that for whatever reason has just showed up a lot for me in the early stages of the drafting. I've had it multiple times. I've played against it multiple times, and it's great. This card really performs well. It just does. It's very impactful on the board. It is a pain to deal with, and it's responsible for pushing through a heck of a lot of damage.
Yeah, fantastic card. It would be great without the Domain ability, and the Domain ability is a powerful one, so pretty happy with Radha's Firebrand. Give this an A-, I think. Yeah,
it's B+ A- range for me too. Really solid card. I mean, it does only have 1 toughness, so it can be a bit of a lightning rod, but I mean, we don't punish cards for that. If they demand to be killed, then they usually do that for a reason. Next is Rundvelt Hordemaster. This is 1 and a red for a 1/1 Goblin Warrior. Yeah, that's right. It's rare. Other goblins you control get +1/+1, and whenever Rundvelt Hordemaster or another goblin you control dies, exile the top card of your library. If it's a goblin creature card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. So big fat no on that one.
Gets an F from me. There's just very few goblins, and the ability's not even that good.
That's right. So F for Rundvelt Hordemaster. Next is Keldon Flamesage. This was our preview card for LR. This is the 2 and a red 2/3 enlist human shaman at rare. And whenever it attacks, you look at the top X cards of your library where X is its power, and you may exile an instant or sorcery card with mana value X or less from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Card's been good.
Yeah, it's a fantastic card. I mean, if you can't enlist, it's pretty strong, but once you are enlisting, the card just does an absurd amount of work.
It really does. Like, if you can get its power to 4, which is trivial. I mean, you just need a 2/2 without summoning sickness, right? You are in business. Like, you are looking at 4 cards and looking for an instant or sorcery that costs 4 or less. That really starts to open the door, and you're casting that stuff for free. So, yeah, I've really liked Keldon Flamesage. I mean, it clearly sings in the blue-red deck, but you can put it in any deck that can cast it. You can just put any deck that can cast it full stop, because a 3 mana 2/3 enlist is like playable. But if you have any instants or sorceries, it goes up quite strongly as well. I would say B+ for Keldon Flamesage, depending on how much you've built around it.
Yeah, I would say B+ A-. If you can ever enlist with this in a deck set up for it, you're just automatically casting a spell.
Yeah,
very close to that. So you're pretty. I've been pretty impressed with the Flamesage, particularly in blue-red, but really any color combination if you have the right stuff going.
Squee Dubious Monarch is 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary Goblin Noble at rare. It's got haste, and whenever Squee Dubious Monarch attacks, you get a 1/1 red Goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. And you can cast Squee from your graveyard by paying 3 and a red and exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard rather than paying its mana cost.
Yeah, I mean, Squee is a Goblet Rabble Master returns, right?
Yes,
You get,
Squee is a problem.
yeah, you get to play Squee. If they don't have a way to kill it before you attack, which they usually don't, you get to attack. You get a 2/2 and a 1/1 attacking. Maybe they trade off for the 2/2. Maybe they block the 1/1. Either way, you're pretty happy. And then later in the game, it just comes back. It's fantastic in like the red black sack deck.
Yep.
Just a good card overall. I'd give Squee a B plus.
Me too. B plus for Squee. You
Where
mentioned
this falls off is like in the late game. If they have like 3 untapped creatures in play, then you're just not that thrilled about this.
Right. And they can see it coming, right? You know, it's in the graveyard. They know, okay, well, you could do that if you wanted. So they'll take care. All right. Next is Defiler of Instinct. This is 2 red for a 4/4 first strike. It's a Phyrexian Kavu at rare. And this has that mana reduction ability for your red permanents. You can pay the Phyrexian mana instead of one of the red. And whenever you cast a red permanent spell, Defiler of Instinct deals 1 damage to any target. This card's sweet.
Very good. Just
it's so good.
I mean, it just sits there as a 4-mana 4/4 first strike, which is obviously just a great place to start. And then later in the game, or even maybe the same turn, depending on what you've got, you get to play things as pings.
Yes, and there are many things to ping. You know, not least of which you can just start going upstairs with it. It's any target, so you can hit an opponent. But boy, anything with 1 toughness is just like, oh, really? Because, you know, all you're going to have to do is just cast any red, usually creature, but any red permanent, and boom, you can start picking off creatures with it. It's also just impossible to tussle with in combat. It has a 4/4 first strike, just super difficult. I like A for Defiler of Instinct. I've had it a few times already, and it's just been phenomenal.
Yeah, it's just a very good card.
Jaya Fiery Negotiator is 2 red for a 4 loyalty legendary planeswalker Jaya at Mythic. 4 abilities. +1, create a 1/1 red monk creature token with prowess. -1, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. -2, choose target creature an opponent controls. Whenever you attack this turn, Jaya Fiery Negotiator deals damage equal to the number of attacking creatures to that creature. And then there is an ultimate here at -8. Now that's a long road to go. There's only the +1. So you got a long way before. But if you do get to -8, it says you get an emblem with whenever you cast a red instant or sorcery spell, copy it twice. You may choose new targets for the copies. Nice.
Yeah.
It's a good card.
Jaya is very good. I mean, when you've got Jaya, if they're not pressuring Jaya and you get to, you know, start using the -1, you end up kind of overwhelming them in cards. Of course, just the +1 is already starting out really strong because you end up with a 5 loyalty planeswalker and a 1/1 blocker, which on your next turn maybe attacks as a 2/2 or a 3/3. And once you have enough creatures in play, the -2 starts to just be a removal spell. Right.
And of course, she populates an army, etc. So, yeah, I really like Jaya Fiery Negotiator. This feels like a very baseline planeswalker, right? Which is a big compliment. You know, that's an A, right? In the sense that we have a planeswalker that can protect itself by making blockers and can draw you cards. Now, it doesn't literally do that, but it effectively, you know, provides cards for you. And that's the formula, right? Like, and this one's only 4 mana with a lot of loyalty as well. So I think it's better than average, you know, for that baseline level of planeswalker. You know, the protect itself, draw cards vibe.
Yeah, I think that's the combination of pretty high loyalty, costing only 4, and having a bunch of abilities to choose from makes Jaya an A.
Yeah, I think so too. A for Jaya Fiery Negotiator. Next is the Elder Dragon War. This is 2 red for an enchantment saga with read ahead, and it has 3 different chapters. First one is it does 2 damage to each creature and each opponent. Chapter 2 is discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. And chapter 3 is create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So we should probably start there, right? Because that's actually your baseline is 4 mana, 4/4 flyer. Just you can always have access to that.
Yeah, that's the fail case. And of course, it's quite a bit stronger than that. The fact that you get to package a sweeper with a rummage your whole hand, if you want, with a 4/4 together is absurd because you get to choose which of these you want. If you want, you can get all of them. If you want, you can skip straight to the 4/4. there's just really no situation where this card is bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess where it's bad is if a 4/4 flyer for 4 doesn't get you the thing you need, but that's a pretty thin place to be.
You're kind of dead already at that point. Like,
yeah, so I would give Elder Dragon War an A+. I actually do think that the card is very, very good. Like, it's just really hard to beat this card.
Yep, I love the Elder Dragon War. I give it an A, but whatever. Every time I've played with or against it, it's been fantastic because of how flexible it is. Temporal Firestorm is next. It's 3 red for a sorcery at rare, and it has kicker of 1 and a white and or 1 and a blue. And it says choose up to X creatures and or planeswalkers you control, where X is the number of times this spell was kicked. Those permanents phase out. And then it says Temporal Firestorm deals 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So your baseline is 5 mana sorcery, deal 5 damage to everything. But if you can kick it for 1 and a white and or 1 and a blue, you could potentially save a couple of your creatures.
I've had this card a bunch of times now, and it's been amazing because...
Okay, I haven't had it yet.
I mean, 5 mana to kill everything, just about, right? It doesn't kill 6/6s, but that's not a typical thing. 5 is a really good break point. 5 mana to kill everything is good if you can build your deck around it. And the fact that if you have 7 or 9 mana, you get to pick your best card or your second best card to save. It's just been really good in like the 5-color decks or in like blue-red spells. So, but both those decks will spend time getting stuff done, but not necessarily always playing to the board, whether it's playing mana fixing or casting impulses. And then your opponent plays a bunch of stuff and you just go turn 5, Temporal Firestorm, kill your 3 creatures.
Yeah.
And if they play around it in a subsequent game, you just go turn 7, Temporal Firestorm, save my best creature, kill my other creature, but then you lose 4 creatures.
Yeah. Would you play it in just like red-green?
Probably. The only deck I would not play this in if I was a base red deck would be like an aggressive red-black deck because this is just such a reactive card. But you'd have to be pretty aggressive where this isn't good. Because if this isn't your opening hand, you still just get to like kind of play things out such that you get to cast this on 5 and, you know, maybe you traded off 1 creature early, but then it kills their other 2 or 3 creatures. And that's just a pretty big edge, just knowing this is coming.
Yeah. What do you like for it? I have yet to have it. So... I seems like an A. Yeah. Okay.
It's funny. I did mention that this set has fewer A's than normal, and we're, going through the colors and they're getting tons of A's. That's because we haven't gotten to gold. Gold is where a lot of it is fairly disappointing. But yeah, Temporal Firestorm gets an A, as do many of these other cards here. Though this is the last A in red because our last red card is Chaotic Transformation.
It just reeks of a commander card, doesn't it?
That's the average rare these days, yeah. 5 in a red. It's a sorcery at rare. Exile up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target enchantment, up to 1 target planeswalker, and or up to 1 target land. So again, every permanent type you can choose an exile one. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a card that shares a card type with it, put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So the idea here, I guess, is you go like target your best creature and target my bad artifact, hit my other artifact, downgrade your best creature. But or you target your own creature token and hope to hit something good. It just seems like 6 mana for a really wide range of things, many of which are not good. So I would give Chaotic Transformation an F. I haven't yet to be convinced that this is a playable card.
I'm going to assume it's an F until proven otherwise. That's it for red. That moves us to green, where our first card out is Leaf Crowned Visionary. Green for a 1/1 elf druid at rare. Other elves you control get +1/+1. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay green. If you do, draw a card.
Yeah, just not enough elves for this card to be playable. So
yeah, it's just, why are these? Yeah. This kind of not to open up the conversation too wide, but this goes back to what we were talking about before with the digital sets that are tailored specifically for limited, this type of stuff just wouldn't be in there,
Yeah, so F for Leaf Crown Visionary, and just stick with it for elves decks.
Yeah, I'm looking at how many elves there are at common. It looks like there are 3.
The problem is you would need to draw 2 cards off this before I felt like it was worth the investment.
Exactly.
Because not going to happen.
Right. There's a few uncommons and a few rares as well, so there's a few around, but yeah, not going to happen. Llanowar Loam Speaker. Here's one of those elves. This is a rare, of course. It's 1 and a green for a 1/3 elf druid at rare. It taps to add 1 mana of any color. And it also taps target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until end of turn. It's still a land, and you can activate this only at sorcery speed. It's a great card.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2 mana, 1/3 mana dork. You would play this without the second ability.
Yeah.
And then the second ability means when you run out of stuff to cast, you can start turning lands into 3/3s and just, go attack with them.
Yeah. Great card. I like B+ for Llanowar Loam Speaker. This is
B+
the
sounds good.
Put into every single green deck. Quirion Beast Caller is next. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2 Dryad Warrior at rare. It says, whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Quirion Beast Caller. It's already a 2/2 for 2, so just the next creature gets you that 3/3, which is already pretty good. And it says, when it dies, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on the Beast Caller.
Fantastic.
Wow, that's great.
The card's a huge threat. If they don't kill it immediately, you're just going to start racking up counters, and then either it will just finish the job, or they're going to be in a spot where they do kill it, and then you move 3 counters onto something else. So I would give an A for Quirion Beast Caller. It's just the card you least want to see on turn 2 from your opponent.
Yeah, the only downside to it is if you draw it later in the game, it has a hard time getting going. Turn 2, it's devastating. I mean, because you're going to play creatures. Like, that's the whole point. This next card's kind of funny. It's called Urborg Lurgoyf. It's a really weird, tough name to say, but I love it. This is 1 and a green for a star, 1+ star. So it always has 1 toughness, and then otherwise a star. And you can kick it for either blue and or black. And it says, as it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards for each time it was kicked. That mills you. And Urborg Lurgoyf's power is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and his toughness is equal to the same +1.
So
I've played it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good card.
Yeah.
You would ideally want to be able to kick it at least one of the colors.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's going to come into play a little bit anemic. But if you're able to do so, especially in black-green has a bit more of that theme going on with like Urborg Repossession and whatnot, then this card's sweet. And in like a 5-color deck that has the ability to, or a 3-color deck even that can kick both times, pretty happy with the card. I would give the Lurgoyf a B. You just have to make sure that you play plenty of creatures in your deck.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would give. Next is Llanowar Green Widow. This is 2 and a green for a 4/3 Reach Trample Spider at rare. So 3 mana 4/3 Reach and Trample. That's a lot. And then it also has Domain. For 7 and a green, you can return Llanowar Green Widow from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It gains, if this permanent would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So you can't keep doing it over and over and over. And this ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control. So again, it's 8 mana to bring it back, but realistically, if you're at least 2 colors, it's already down to 6 mana. And in these type of decks, you could see that getting quite a bit lower. But holy smokes, man, talk about pushing it, right? We call these a rate monster. This is a 3 mana 4/3 Reach Trample that you can get back one time.
Yeah, this card is extremely strong, and even in a 2-color deck, it's still fantastic. At 6 mana to bring back, you're usually going to be paying less. Also, it's a 3 mana 4/3 Reach Trample. You would just never cut this card.
Yeah,
so
I love it. I give it a B+ for Llanowar Green Widow. This isn't the type of card that devastates the opponent in the sense that they can interact with it. Like they can kill it with removal, they can block it and trade. But it's incremental advantage and it's extremely efficient. And so I like B+ for Llanowar Green Widow. What do you think?
I like A-. Your opponent plays this on turn 3. You're going to be like, all right, best case scenario, I lightning strike it, and then 2 turns later, they're just going to cast it again.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. I mean, and if they don't have an answer to it, it's just going to get in there.
2 for 1. It's not. They can recover. You can beat it.
It is beatable, but it is very good. So
it is very good.
It looks like we have a consensus of A- on Llanowar Green Widow. Threats Undetected is 2 and a green. It's a sorcery at rare. Search your library for up to 4 creature cards with different powers and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards, shuffle the chosen cards back into your library, and put the rest into your hand.
So you're getting the 2 worst of 4 different powered creatures from your library.
Yeah, so a good way to shorthand it is you're going to get the third and fourth best creature in your library. Of course, if your two best creatures have the same power, then you're going to have to skip over one of them. But for the most part, you're going to get two good cards for 3 mana, assuming you've got enough of a range to kind of support that.
Man, I don't love it. I like getting two spells. Like that part I like. But I don't like that you can't hit lands, right? Like you just can't fire this thing off on turn 3 to keep hitting your lands or whatever. Like this is definitely a later game spell to reload when you're kind of out of gas. I guess if that's the case, then you 6-5-4-3. If you happen to have that distribution, you're going to get the 4 and the 3 or the 5 and the 3 or something like that, depending on what cards you have. Man, I don't like giving my opponent this much agency. They can look at their hand and say, well, I'll give you these 2 cards that I can beat, and we'll put the other 2 back.
Yeah, but it's still a 3-mana draw too.
It is, and it's 2 spells.
And the two you draw, like you said, are actual spells. I think I'm pretty happy with Threats Undetected. It's like a C+. It's not an amazing card, but in a creature heavy deck, I'll just play this card.
Okay, I'm a little down on it. I'm going to give it a C-.
Sure.
Defiler of Vigor is next. This is 3 green for a 6/6 Phyrexian Worm at rare. It's got Trample. And this also has that mana reduction ability via Phyrexian mana, but for green. And it says, whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I had this once. I tell you what, this one feels like a Mythic.
Yes, it does.
This card's stupid. Like, because you can set up scenarios in the later game where you cast it and then cast something off of it for cheaper, and it doesn't matter what it is as long as it's a green permanent, and then your whole team gets +1/+1 counters. Like, it's stupid. I like A to A+ for Defiler of Vigor. It felt unbeatable to me when I had it.
Yeah, I think A+ is correct for Defiler of Vigor. Some of the other Defilers, like the red one, right? You ping one, or the white one, you get a 1/1. If your opponent casts them, then casts a permanent afterwards, you're like, all right, this, I have to kill this Defiler, but we got a game here. When they play Defiler of Vigor and then play a green creature afterwards, the game just feels like it's over.
Totally. This is what we contrast this against for the black one, right? Where they're like, hey, look, +1/+1 and menace until end of turn. How about +1/+1 counters to my entire team, right? It's like, this is a totally different level. Love it. Defiler of Vigor, A+. I'll let you read Silverback Elder. I don't think I need to indulge.
2 green for a 5/7 Ape Shaman at Mythic. Whenever you cast a creature spell, choose one. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. The rest go on the bottom. Or you gain 4 life.
That's hard to cast. It doesn't have any form of any abilities, right? Just straight up 5/7 vanilla.
Yeah, 5/7 vanilla.
So 5 mana, 5/7, which is pretty good, but 2 GGG is tough. Boy, but it's just every creature spell you just get. I don't know. It's a little weird, right? Because none of these are very good, right? Like the 4 life is somehow the best of them. If you've got 5 mana and 3 of it green, I guess maybe the next land might be relevant, but after that fades fairly quickly. And then the artifact or enchantment's going to be situationally excellent or completely useless.
Yeah, so what ends up, I think, happening with this card is if you play this, and again, it is kind of difficult to play color-wise, right? And your opponent doesn't kill it, every creature you play is at the very least gaining you 4 life. Mm-hmm. Which does make it pretty hard to race, and you'll kill any artifacts or enchantments they have kind of floating around. And then you can also fetch lands if you're in a pretty comfortable life position. It seems fine to me, but not. It looks a lot more exciting than it is on first blush. Yes. Though I think you will be happy to play this in a heavy green deck because those decks also just tend to have a lot of creatures. But I don't think that Silverback Elder is like comparable to, something like Defiler of Vigor.
Yeah, that's I was thinking that same comparison where it's just not even on that level. A little interesting that they went like on like if I just came up to you and said, okay, Luis, I saw a card from the next set. It costs 2 green, 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 and it's a mythic rare. It's a 5/7 with no other abilities, but whenever you cast a creature, it does one of these 3 things. You fill in those blanks, right? I mean, you would be thinking like it makes a 3/3, it draws you a card.
Titan of industry.
Right, exactly, right? You would just start pumping out like, kind of insane stuff. And somehow none of these are actually on that level. Like not even, there isn't one go-to where you're like, that's awesome. And you probably just do that every time. So it's kind of interesting, but still, like you said, if you're heavy green, you're always playing it. And man, if you do happen to have an artifact or enchantment around, it just runs roughshod over them. So I like the card a lot, but it's just, you have to adjust your, when you see a big mana cost and a mythic rare symbol, I think you're thinking like, they're going to go completely ballistic with a card like this. And they just didn't with this one. They kept it kind of in bounds. I like it at B+, mainly just because the mana cost is a little bit difficult, but it's huge and has 3 relevant abilities at least. So I still like it quite a bit. So I give Silverback Elder a B+. What do you like for it?
Yeah, it's exactly great. I want to give it a B+.
What about Herd Migration?
This is 6 and a green for a sorcery at rare, and has Domain. Create a 3/3 beast for each basic land type among lands you control. So 7 mana, put 3 to 5 beasts into play in the decks that are playing this.
Yep.
Pretty strong. And it has 1 and a green, discard Herd Migration, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and gain 3 life. So
jeez.
Basically, this is a powerful 7 mana spell that also has 2 mana, cycle it for a basic land and 3 life. So it does exactly what the 5 color decks want to do on both ends. It's a huge reward for having Domain, and it's a really nice way to guarantee you get to Domain. So yeah, this card is very good. It's an A-. It's one of the better cards you can open for your Domain decks.
Incredible. I'm actually a little sad that it's rare. Like, if this is an uncommon, like maybe it's too strong for that, but like I'd love to see a card, an enabler like this. Maybe it's just too good. The last green card rare is actually a mythic rare. It's called the World Spell, and it's 7 mana, 5 green green for a saga. So this thing better be insane. It has read ahead. Chapters 1 and 2 are the same, and it says, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-saga permanent card from among them and put it into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So you get to do that twice if you'd like. Chapter 3 is put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Woo!
Tooth and nail? Like a tooth and nail, exactly. I like the idea here, and this might do something in Constructed, but so let's say you're playing limited, right? And you pay 7 mana and you're like, I want to get the full value. I'm going to start this chapter 1. So I'm going to look at my top 7 cards, put a permanent in my hand. Your opponent then takes their turn and like does whatever they're going to do, maybe attacks you. On your next turn, you get to draw another card. But then you probably have to cast one of them or cast something, right? Because otherwise you're just, kind of losing badly here. And then on the third turn, do you have 2 non-saga permanents to put into play? Because you've already spent a turn at 7 or 8 mana casting stuff. And yes, you've drawn 2 cards off this, but I just don't really see this is a really expensive divination that promises you some mana at the end, but I don't know if you can last long enough, and you're not really going to cast this and immediately dump cards into play because your hand would have to be really weird for that to be the right play.
Yeah, to me, this is a perfect spot for a mythic, right? Because ultimately, this card's just not that good. Like you said, card selection plus getting a card in your hand is nice, but the mana advantage from Chapter 3 is wasted when you've already got at least 7. Would you play this?
No, I don't think this card is good. I think the World Spell is bad.
It's just not playable, right?
It's not. Like, you could convince me that I would board this in some matchups, but this is not a card I would put in my deck.
Okay. I'm sad. I like cards like that. F for World Spell?
Like a D is probably fine, but
D,
yeah, I mean,
there may be an occasion. Do we want to do white and then the gold cards?
Yeah, let's circle back to white.
Okay.
And we're going to start with Guardian of New Benalia. This is a 1 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier at rare. It has enlist, and whenever it enlists a creature, you scry 2. And it has discard a card. Guardian of New Benalia against indestructible until end of turn, tap it. I have now played against this card enough times to know that it's quite obnoxious
It
because
sucks. I hate playing against this thing.
they're frequently just going to like attack with this, enlist something, even something small, and now it's a 4/2. They get to scry 2, and if you block, you're losing your creature, and they're losing their worst card in hand.
Yes.
It's just a really good aggressive card. I would not want to play this. I would not want to like slam this in a control deck, but you'd still play this because the rate is just so good on the card. And then in like a red-white aggro deck or a black-white aggro deck, that I've been run over by this card. So I would give Guardian of New Benalia a B+.
Me too, because they made the timing all benefit the Guardian player, right?
Yeah.
Like, remember before when it was like, I have a 1/1, but when it attacks, it becomes a 3/1, and it has this like discard a card. Where this one is like, you have to decide ahead of time, right? Because what you want to do, right, is let them attack and list and then do the thing that takes it out of combat or makes them lose a card or whatever. But they're already attacking. They already got their scry and they already have their 4-powered indestructible coming at you. So you have to do it before that. B+ for Guardian of New Benalia. It's really obnoxious. Valiant Veteran is 1 and a white for a 2/2 core soldier at rare. Guess what? Other soldiers you control get +1/+1. And you can pay 3 white and exile it from your graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on each soldier you control.
I mean, this is playable because it's a 2-mana 2/2 in a color that wants 2-mana 2/2s. And there are a couple other soldiers running around.
Yeah,
and there's like
3 in common. Mm-hmm.
There's also Captain's Call at common. So it's the 3 and a white make 3 1/1 soldiers.
Okay.
So I would give it a C+. I mean,
Yeah.
I've thought the card was reasonable when I played against it a few times.
Yeah, and you'll just have that random draw where you have the Veteran and the Captain's Call, and it's like, hey, this is actually quite strong. Anointed Peacekeeper. This is 2 and a white for a 3/3 Vigilance Human Cleric at rare. So already you're getting a 3/3 Vigilance for 3. And it says, as Anointed Peacekeeper enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand, then choose any card name. I guess you can choose any card name in the game. That's kind of cool.
Yep.
Spells your opponent's cast with the chosen name cost 2 more to cast. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name cost 2 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. Cool.
Yeah, pretty solid card. I mean, it's a 3 mana 3/3 Vigilance, already decent. And then what you probably end up doing, because when this goes away, the spells no longer cost more, of course. So it's not a permanent thing. You just probably want to disrupt their curve. You play this on 3, you just name whatever their 3-drop is, and they can't play a 3-drop on turn 3. Or if they have 2 3-drops, you name whatever a 4-drop is to delay that by 2 turns. And then sometimes I have seen this card name a card the opponent has 2 copies of, which is pretty funny. But cool. That is not going to happen too often.
Yeah. And then there, I suppose, are times where if they already have something that's activating an ability and wreaking havoc, you just name that.
Yeah, if they have an activated ability, there's just not that many of those.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you're gonna name the like sunbathing Rootwalla and make it cost 6 to activate, and then they'll just pay 6 to activate it.
Take that, yeah, and then they just do it anyway. I like B+ for Anointed Peacekeeper. This card just does a lot and has a high floor.
Yeah, it's totally solid.
Temporary Lockdown is 1 white for an enchantment at rare. When it enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until Temporary Lockdown leaves the battlefield. It's kind of weird that this is in white, right? Like, just kills all your own stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure which double white cost deck doesn't want cheap cards, but I haven't found it yet. Really.
I haven't either.
Because the double white means you're not playing this in your domain decks, and you don't really want this in like red-white. And the thing is, even against a lot of your opponents, it's not going to exile all that much.
Yeah.
I do think it's a great sideboard card against Wingmantle Chaplain, the 0/3 that makes a 1/1 flyer for each wall. So when you play Lockdown, it just nukes all their 1/1 flyers. They never come back.
Yeah.
So
that's good. And some of the defenders are 2 mana as well. So
yeah.
Okay. So sideboard for Temporary Lockdown?
Yeah, I like sideboard. It's like a sideboard B.
Yeah. It's a weird fit for white, but yeah. Oh man, this next card, Archangel of Wrath. It's 2 white for a 3/4 flying lifelink angel at rare. So that's already fantastic. And the 4 toughness in this format is excellent as well. So this is already just premium material. But it also has kicker for red and or black. And it says, when Archangel of Wrath enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to any target. And then it says, when Archangel of Wrath enters the battlefield, if it was kicked twice, it deals 2 damage to any target.
So,
God, that's stupid.
It just comes in, it eats 1 or 2 things, maybe or maybe 1 big thing, drains the opponent, or gains you 4 life because it has lifelink. And then you're left with the 3/4 flying lifelink. I have lost to this card. I have not had the fortune of having it yet. But, I mean, it's a clear A. Archangel of Wrath is just fantastic.
Yeah, I would go A+. It's so difficult to lose after you cast. Even just 3/4 flying lifelink stabilizes your board. Like, they have to kill that or they're not going to have lethal attacks in most scenarios. But with Kicker, it just gets absolutely stupid. I've had the misfortune of have somebody double kick this against me too. And I'm just like, really? Like, the game went from, being close to being really not close. What does Sarah Paragon do?
It's not much worse, if at all. It's 2 white for a 3/4 flying angel at Mythic Rare. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into a graveyard, exile it, and you gain 2 life. So it's like a super Loris because you can play 3-cost stuff and cards that are and lands. And then you only get to do it once, though, because once one of those things dies, you gain 2 life and it gets exiled. But it's a 4-mana 3/4 flyer with an ability that effectively draws you a card every single turn.
This is Sun Titan?
Yeah, mini Sun Titan. So
for 4?
Sarah Paragon also gets an A. It's just a really, really strong card.
Yeah, that one just gets a regular A. Wow. Danitha Benalia's Hope is next. This is 4 and a white for a 4/4 legendary human knight at rare. And she's got First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. So not short on stats. And then it says, when Danitha Benalia's Hope enters the battlefield, you may put an aura or equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to Danitha. That has a lot of exciting text until you kind of get to that end part, that it's only things that augment your creature. So equipment, that's obvious, but you can't get back an Oblivion Ring effect or something like that. Or anything like a pacifism effect is what I would say, something like that. But still, you got a 5-mana 4/4 First Strike Vigilance Lifelink. Like that's a huge stop sign. Like, how is the opponent supposed to tussle with that in combat, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're really not. It's just it's a ground Baneslayer Angel.
Yeah.
And we're going to see this as we get to the gold cards. But one of the things that really bugs me about the rares in this set is how many of them have a big block of text that have nothing to do with what's going on in the set.
Yeah, totally. That I have yet to see that happen on my side or the other, but the card's still really great. I mean,
yeah.
B+ for Danitha? Is it an A-? I mean, it is.
It's just an A.
Just an A? Okay.
4/4 Vigilance, First Strike, Lifelink. It's not like it's dying in combat, really.
Right. Yeah, and they can't attack. So A for Danitha Benalia's Hope. Next is Defiler of Faith. This is 3 white for a 5/5 Phyrexian human with Vigilance. It's rare. And this one has the ability to make your white spells cheaper with the Phyrexian thing. And then it says, whenever you cast a white permanent spell, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. It's good.
Yeah, it's solid. I mean, it's another one of the less busted defilers, but still I think is just going to do a really substantial amount of work when it comes to playing this. It helps you go wide. The white decks tend to have a lot of permanents, whereas the blue decks have not quite as many. And then you end up in a spot where if they can't deal with a 5/5 Vigilance, you're already pretty happy. I
mean, I'm tempted to just give Defiler of Faith an A.
I think it's like an A-, but yeah.
Okay. I just it's huge. And then if, you start spitting out these tokens, it really stabilizes you and lets you set up for a big attack too. A- for Defiler of Faith. Next is Urza Assembles the Titans. Wow. 3 white for a Enchantment Saga at rare. It has read ahead. It says, Chapter 1, Scry 4. Then you may reveal the top card of your library. If a Planeswalker card is revealed this way, put it in your hand. Womp. Chapter 2, you may put a Planeswalker card with mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. Okay. Chapter 3, you may activate the loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers you control twice this turn rather than only once. Get out of here. What is this thing? They
all have to do with Planeswalkers and none of them do anything else. This is an F.
F. Last one is called Leyline Binding, and this is 5 and a white for an enchantment with flash at rare. It has domain. It costs 1 less to cast for each basic land type you control. And when Leyline Binding enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Leyline Binding leaves the battlefield. So you got a instant speed Oblivion Ring here.
That's probably going to cost you 3 mana or so, maybe 2.
4, 3, 2, somewhere in that range. Great.
Yeah, I mean this is a great card. I mean, it's probably a little worse on balance than the uncommon version that gains you 2 life, but it's still quite strong. You're going to be happy with this in pretty much any deck, and it's great in the domain deck. So give a B+ for Leyline Binding. B+
for Leyline Binding. Really solid. I mean, instant speed matters a lot. It just does. Okay, let's get to these gold cards that you were talking about. Do you want to say anything about them before we dive in, Luis, or do you want to let the
No, I mean, mostly it's just the kind of the thing I mentioned where there's just like a lot of text that has to do with effectively commander stuff or themes that are otherwise not supported. And it's just not that interesting to have some amount of that is acceptable, right? Every set's going to have serve needs that are more than just limited. I'm totally fine with that. But to the degree that they went here, it's not a great preview of if this is what was going to happen on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, I think Urza Assembles the Titans is a good example. We can just ignore it. It's like, that's a Planeswalker-centric card. It's not for limited, no problem. We just move on. But when we have like the full cycle of the tribal things and then tribes aren't really supported, it's like, huh? Like these are that's 5 cards in here. Let's get into these gold cards and we'll see what they brought for us. So the first one is called Sten Paranoid Partisan. White blue for a 2/2 legendary human wizard at rare. As Sten Paranoid Partisan enters the battlefield, choose a card type other than creature or land. And it says spells you casted the chosen type cost 1 less to cast, and you can pay 1 blue-white and exile Sten, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you can reset the type, I suppose.
Yeah, so you're gonna name instant a lot of the time, and you're gonna have like a kind of budget Goblin Electromancer, and then late in the game you can just block and blink this, or if you want to blink it to reset the type, but that's not even that impressive. But you could do that if you wanted to.
It's hard to see that this card could be bad, right? It's 2 mana for a 2/2 that allows you to at least look at your hand, and theoretically, as long as you don't have a creature or land, you could say, well, I'll just make this 1 card a little cheaper. Like, that's not the worst. And then as you mentioned, I mean, it could be an annoying engine late where you're just like, block your biggest thing, blink it. And yes, it's costing you 3 mana to do this, but like you could just hold back a ground creature without evasion sort of indefinitely.
Yeah, I think it's overall pretty poor. My guess is that you would play this in a blue-white deck if you had a lot of spells, but you'd probably avoid it otherwise.
You think you just wouldn't play it?
Most of the time, it's just not going to be that great. Like, it's like a C. You'll play it in blue-white a fair amount, I guess.
That's how I have it. I mean, I think the blink ability will come up just often enough or, be annoying on some capacity. Urtai Resurrected is next. It's 2 black-blue for a 3/2 legendary Phyrexian human wizard at rare. It's got flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you choose up to 1. You can counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, and its controller draws a card. Or you can destroy another target creature or planeswalker, and its controller draws a card. And you can choose none of those if you'd like as well.
Yeah, but you're gonna almost always kill something with this or counter something, because it's not a ridiculous I got to stick 2 for 1 because your opponent's going to get their card back, but it's still very good. You're still at card parity because you got a 3/2 out of the deal.
Yeah.
And you're at a significant tempo parity when you're like, play this, kill the card you played on 4, untap. Now I've got my 4-drop in play plus my 3-drop and whatnot. And then
you just got a card in your hand. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that Urtai Resurrected is an A-. It's just a really strong card.
It's interesting because given that it's not really card advantage, it really performs. Every time somebody's played this, I'm like, wow, that sucks. Like, I'm behind now. So yeah, I like A- for Urtai Resurrected as well. Rivaz of the Claw, or Rivaz of the Claw, is 1 black-red for a 3/3 legendary Viashino Warlock. Wow. At rare. It's got Menace, so 3 mana, 3/3 Menace. and has a bunch of text. You can tap it to add 2 mana in any combination of colors.
You think it has a bunch of text.
You can spend this mana only to cast dragon creature spells. And it says once during each of your turns, you may cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard. And it also says whenever you cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard, it gains when this creature dies, exile it. Yeah, so again, just not really supported, right? Like there isn't a dragon sub-theme in this set.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 2 other dragons in this set. Dragon Whelp is the most interesting one because it's an uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not really gonna, combo that too much. Mostly, this is a 3/3 menace for 3, which is fine. I've played this in black red and felt pretty good about it. So
okay.
I think Revaz is like a B-. It's just whatever grade you'd give for a 3/3 menace for 3.
Yeah, you're right. So there's 1 non-rare dragon, which is Dragon Whelp. There's 3 other dragons technically, but 2 of them are mythic and one's regular rare. So it's just not a thing. Yeah. So, but still B- for Revaz. I mean, that's still just a good baseline stats.
Yeah.
Myria, Scholar of Antiquity is next. This is 1 green-red for a 3/3 legendary elf artificer at rare. It says tap an untapped non-token artifact you control to add green, and tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control to exile the top card of your library, and you could play it this turn. Yeah, I get where you're coming from, Luis. Like, just those 2 cards, like, artifacts is not a pushed thing here. There's a few around, but, like, really? Like, you're going to fill out your deck with a bunch of artifacts, try to get this thing going? Doesn't seem like that's a thing.
No, it's really not. So Myria is like a C because sometimes you'll play a 3-mana 3/3. And, every now and then you randomly have a couple artifacts in play. That's not completely inconceivable, but it's really just not how this is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little disappointing to have all that design space and then kind of go, but that's not really for us. Next is King Darien the 48th.
I'll take your word for it.
I think it's 48th. It's 1 green-white for a 2/3 legendary human soldier at rare. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. Thank you, King Darien, for not caring about particular types. It just bumps up your whole team. And then you can pay 3 green-white to put a +1/+1 counter on King Darien and create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, which is really a 2/2. And then you can also sacrifice King Darien to give creature tokens you control hexproof and indestructible until the turn. He can sacrifice himself to save the peasants.
Save the rest of your army. But even a 3-mana 2/2 that pumped your squad would be interesting. And then the fact that you get to pay 5 to get another 2/2 and make King Darien bigger as long as he sticks around. So I'm in for that. King Darien is worth splashing and just quite good overall.
Yeah. It turns out if you've been around long enough to be the 48th of your line, you really figure out how to be a great king, it turns out. Usually, historically, that hasn't been the case. It's kind of, the longer it goes, the worse it gets, if you go back to like Roman times and stuff. But King Darien is the exception to the rule, and this card's great. I mean, really awesome card. Like, I would just give King Darien an A. Like, it's an absolute must kill. Like, you just can never let King Darien survive.
Yeah, King Darien is an A, and your opponent's going to have to go out of their way to kill it. Otherwise, they're going to be in quite a bit of trouble.
What the heck does a Johnny Sleeper Agent do? Like, a Johnny's vibe really isn't like secret spy, right? But
no, this is more like the whole infected by the Phyrexian sort of thing. So it's a 1 and a green-white hybrid Phyrexian and a white. So if you remember from Tamiyo, this is kind of that sort of vibe. Where your opponent, where you can choose you have to pay 1 green-white, and then if you choose to, you can pay 2 life or a green or a white to play it. And it's a 4 loyalty planeswalker at Mythic rare. If you play the Phyrexian mana, it starts with 2 fewer loyalty, so we'll start at 2 loyalty. Okay. So it's 3 mana for a 2 loyalty Ajani or 4 mana for a 4 loyalty Ajani. You're usually going to want to pay the 4 mana if you can get there. +1, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker, put it in your hand. Otherwise, you may put it on the bottom. So it's +1 to either draw a card or scry, effectively. -3, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among up to 3 target creatures, which means you have 3 counters. It could be all 3 on 1, it could be 2 on 1, or it could be 1/1/1. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn.
Nice.
And then -6, you get an emblem whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker, target opponent gets 2 poison counters.
Oh yeah, somebody ultimated this against me.
Yeah, pretty funny. The emblem is I mean, it does put them on a clock, I guess. It does.
I was able to get to 8 poison counters and then scrap out a win. I was like, oops.
That's pretty good.
And it was, of course, like came down to like, okay, go, right? It's like, if you draw a creature, I lose. If you don't, what do you think of Ajani overall? Kind of a weird mix of abilities, right? Like, doesn't have the whole protect itself thing going on.
No, not so much.
But it does give you some form of card advantage with the plus, or it just lets you kind of have a really nasty -3 to just, put, like, that's a big turn, right? To put 3 counters on your creatures and slam in with something with vigilance.
Yeah, I think overall Ajani is going to be good if you have a board presence and kind of bad if you don't.
Yeah. I like B for Ajani Sleeper Agent. Like, there's some power there, but we do have to kind of adjust away from the normal, like I called it a baseline planeswalker before. Like this isn't that. This is a more narrow version of a planeswalker where you don't just play it and get to just take over the game and win and make a mini game about Ajani Sleeper Agent only. Like there's other things at play here for sure. I like B for Ajani.
Yeah, I think B to B plus is fine for Ajani.
Yeah. Ratadrabic of Urborg is 2 black-white for a 3/3 legendary zombie wizard at rare. It's got vigilance and ward 2. And it says other zombies you control have vigilance. That is a sentence I don't think I ever thought I would see on a Magic card. Whenever another legendary creature you control dies, really? Create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. That is a cool, like, I get it, but also, like, it has to be legendary.
Has to be legendary.
Ugh. I mean, there are more legendary creatures in this set than normal, but still.
Yeah, it's not impossible that you would put Ratadrabic in your deck because you'll have some amount of other legendary creatures. But it's really not the kind of build around you're going to want to go deep on because it's not even that crazy when it works. Like sometimes some of the legends, if you got a 2/2 copy of, would still just be a dork. And for the most part, you're not going to get any copies off this because they'll kill this first, even with Ward 2.
Yes.
And 4 mana Vigilance Ward 2 as a 3/3 is not that impressive.
No, and the zombies you control have vigilance, I assume, isn't going to be much of a thing. Even if you can pop one off, it's like, so what?
Yeah.
There's a lot of so what on this card to me. Like, yeah, I'm like vigilance. Okay, sure. Ward 2's fine, I guess. Okay. And then the other stuff's all just kind of so what? I don't know. And this one is below the bar a little bit. Like, Revaz and Mary are both 3/3s for 3. This is a 4 mana 3/3 with a little bit of sweetener.
Yeah.
I want to give it a lower grade than it probably deserves.
Well, that's the thing about all these cards is some of them are fine, but because of just like the numbers on them. But having all this text that you can't use just feels, kind of bad. There's like a really old like design example where let's say you have like a 4 mana 3/4, right? A card you'd be like pretty happy to play in limited. Mm-hmm. Now, at least under the old times you would, right? Mm-hmm. Now imagine that card got pay 7 mana. This creature gains protection from squirrels until end of turn.
Right.
Like, yes, that is better. The second card's better than the first card, but the second card's going to piss you off a lot more because you're going to look at it and be like, 7 mana to do nothing, or like 7 mana, this gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It's just like, this looks terrible. A lot of people will even say the second card is worse. Yes,
they will. This is the main reason why the vanilla tests exist. This is why Ryan hammered that in the early days of LR was, you got to be able to strip away. This is also why you'll often hear me say things like, oh, so it's a 3 mana 3/3 menace, and then I'll read the rest of it because I'm establishing that's your base. That's your worst case. Like in this one, it's 4 mana 3/3 vigilance ward 2. That's your worst case. I'm not that excited about that. I would give that about a C or a C-. And and the rest of the text doesn't sway me away from it in a meaningful way. So I would give Ratadrabic like a C.
Yeah, that's about where I'd land on that as well.
But I'm a little upset about it. Next is...
Well, get ready, because Joyra Ageless Innovator is next. She's blue-red for a 2/3 legendary human artificer at rare. And her only ability is tap. Put 2 Ingenuity counters on Joyra. Then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of Ingenuity counters on her. So you tap her and you get to play a 1 or 2 mana artifact. The next turn you tap her and you get to play a 4 mana artifact. And that's just not how it's going to work in Limited. It's a 2 mana 2/3, which maybe you're into sometimes, but is again like a C with a bunch of extraneous text.
Yeah, maybe even a C-. I mean, it is a gold card. It's harder to cast.
Yeah, so really unimpressive. The next one is good, though. Namada Primeval Warden. So this is the rehash of Namada Grove Guardian. This is 2 black-green for a 3/4 legendary tree folk at rare. It has reach.
Ooh.
If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead, and when you do, make a 1/1 green sapling creature token.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You can also pay a green and sacrifice a sapling to give Namada +2/+2 until end of turn, or pay 1 and a black and sacrifice 2 saplings to draw a card.
Now that's a card. And that isn't overpowered, right? But that's sweet.
No, that's a good card.
That's really good card, and that's a good use of a lot of text.
Right. So when this card's in play, your opponent's going to really try hard to not have any of their creatures die, which puts them in an awkward spot when it comes to combat. Obviously, if you play removal spells alongside Namada, you're going to get paid off. And in my experience, because I've had this card a couple times, you don't really sack the saplings to draw a card. You'd rather just leave them and play as little giant growth for Namada, that as you just kind of attack them for 3 to 5 damage a turn. Yeah. But of course, you can sack them to draw a card if you want. So I like A- for Namada. It's the kind of card that if it's in play, your opponent is really going to have a hard time winning.
Also, you really had me at 4 mana 3/4 reach. Like that to me is just an absolutely perfect stat line for the type of decks that green black wants to play, right? It's just this, it can attack, but really it's a fantastic blocker. And then you get all this other great stuff. Yeah, I love it. That's a cool card. What does Aster Bearer of Blades do? And does it have to do with equipment?
It's 2 red-white for a 4/4, and it has no relevant text.
God. Is it
it's got
about
a lot
equipment?
of text, though. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 7 cards, and you can put an equipment or vehicle from them into your hand. Equipment you control have equip 1, and vehicles you control have crew 1. So the problem is the equipment in the set's just not good. So you're not going to want to play it as in order to make Astor better, and the other abilities are complete blanks. So Astor Bearer of Blades gets probably like a C as a 4 mana 4/4, maybe a C+. And if you care about legendaries, like there's some reasons to care about that in the set, then yeah, I guess it's a legendary creature, but mostly just a 4 mana 4/4.
This kind of reeks of a reasonably designed card that didn't quite make the cut in like 2 sets ago.
Yeah.
When Red White cared about vehicles and equipment or whatever. And they were like, well, we'll just throw that in here. I obviously don't know if that's the case, but it just feels so out of place. Next one is Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief. This is blue-green for a 2/1 legendary fairy rogue at rare. It's got flying. Whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, you may copy that spell. That copy targets Ivy.
So it works for both players, but what it does is it steals their pump spells or doubles your pump spells. Well, steals is in they still get theirs, but you also get one. It kind of clones them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work. It doesn't interact with removal in the way you want, because you're never going to want to copy removal spells onto Ivy. So it's basically just pump spells. Cards like Timely Interference are pretty cute with this, where you get to copy it and draw an extra card. And it's blue-green for a 2/1 flying. Yeah. So I would just play this if I had the colors for it. This would be fine, because my domain decks have been red, green, blue base most of the time. So I would just play Ivy in most of them as a 2-mana card that does something. And then, if you end up with a targeted spell or two, it's pretty nice copying Gaia's Mites or Timely Interferences. So I would give Ivy a B.
Yeah, I think so too. It also has a worthy follow-up note here. It says a copy of an aura spell becomes a token. So those actually count too.
Yeah, not a whole lot of those that you're going to want to do, but every now and then it'll mess up their text too.
I like B for Ivy as well. This one's really interesting. So this is Zur Eternal Schemer. And this is one of the cards that in the earlier days of EDH was really hated. Zur the Enchanter was a popular commander. And this is maybe an evolved version. This is white, blue, black for a 1/4 flying legendary human wizard. And it says enchantment creatures you control have death touch, lifelink, and hexproof. Enchantment creatures. Then it says 1 and a white, target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to its other types and has a base power and base toughness each equal to its mana value.
Yeah, I mean, this is just an F. Like, it's a hard to cast 1/4 flyer with no text.
So, like, but what if I have, like, the arrest thing? 1 white, white. That's not an aura, right?
Citizen's arrest? Yeah, I mean, you could do that, but then you're going to trade that in combat and give them their creature back?
Right.
Like, it has hexproof and lifelink and death touch. It doesn't have first strike. It doesn't have indestructible. Like, it will trade for a 3/3.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's just an F for Zur Eternal Schemer. Okay. What about Solkanar the Tainted?
I love it. Solkanar the Swamp King is one of my favorite cards. This is 2 blue, black, red. So black, red, blue, and 2. So 5 mana for a 5/5 elemental demon at Mythic Rare. At the beginning of your end step, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Draw a card. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Solkanar deals 3 damage to up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker.
Jeez.
Or exile Solkanar and then return it to the battlefield under an opponent's control. So it's kind of like Demonic Pact, where you play Solkanar, you pass the turn, get one of the abilities. Next turn you can attack or whatever, get a second ability. Next turn attack, get a third ability. Next turn attack again for the 3rd time, and then have to give it to them. But the reason I think this card is awesome is it gets 3 attacks, a lightning bolt, a drain 2, and a draw card before you have to give it to them. What is going on that the Solkanar hasn't just completely demolished them? And then you also have bounce or removal as ways to potentially get around the drawback. I mean, removal's not that appealing. You don't really want to just cast, a removal spell on your own creature, but bouncing Solkanar after getting 3 triggers off it is obviously very, very good.
That's insane. And if you're just simply turning the card sideways, like, it will demand a trade or chump or something from your opponent. Like, they can't just take 15 and the drain 2 and then lose a creature and have you draw. Like you said, it just demolishes their board.
Yeah, sacrifice effects are also really good. So if you have a Hurler Cyclops or a Bone Shards.
Oh, God, yeah.
So basically, Solkanar is awesome. Every deck that you put it in, by virtue of the colors, probably has a way or two to at least, the very least, remove it. And if you do have Solkanar, I would prioritize finding ways to sacrifice or bounce it in order to not run into the issue that
think
giving
you
your
need
opponent
to?
the card. I don't. You can play this card without any of that.
Okay.
But it's still better if you found a couple ways to do that.
Okay.
If you could.
Yeah. What a card.
So I'd give A for Solkanar.
Me too.
Fantastic card.
I think you're just going to win the game before the whole giving it away thing even matters. Also of note, it is at the beginning of your end step, so you get that right away.
Yeah. And you're almost always going to want a lightning bolt first. Just kill whatever their best creature is that you can kill, and then draw a card and then drain 2. Of course, the texture of the game is going to really inform what order those go in.
Yep. What about Soul of Windgrace?
This is 1 red, green, black. So Jund +1. Mm-hmm. It's a 5/4 legendary cat avatar at Mythic Rare. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can put a land card from your graveyard tapped under your control. From any graveyard, sorry. It has.
Wow, I didn't know it could take cards. Wow, my opponent could have taken mine when they beat me senseless with this card. Okay.
Yeah, I found out when I cast this once, thinking I was going to get no lands, and my opponent's graveyard popped up.
Oh, that's sweet.
So you can pay a green and discard a land to gain 3 life. You can pay 1 and a red and discard a land to draw a card, or you can pay 2 and a black and discard a land to give Soul of Windgrace indestructible and tap it. So one cool thing with this card is, if you play this and have mana left over, in response to the enters the battlefield trigger, you can discard a land to gain 3 or draw a card, and then have that land come back into play immediately if you've got no lands in your graveyard.
Right. You just sort of cycle through them.
And then from then on, whenever you draw a land, you probably just, like, if they don't have good blocks, you'll just discard a land to draw a card, attack, put the land in play, or gain 3. If they do have good blocks, maybe you save a land so you can give this indestructible when they block. It's 4 mana, 5/4 with a bunch of extra cool abilities. That's an A for me.
It's an A. Yeah, I faced this thing down and it absolutely trounced me. I was like, what does this thing do? And then I got to see the loop sort of happen where it was like, oh, I see. Yeah, card's brutal. Another one. The next card is Rith Liberated Primeval. This is 2 red, green, white for a 5/5 legendary dragon at Mythic rare. So this thing better just be amazing, right? It's named after a famous dragon for Magic. It's also Mythic. And it is. It's a 5/5 flying ward 2. So straight away, 5 mana, 5/5 flyer with ward 2 is great. Other dragons you control have ward 2. Shrug. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature or planeswalker an opponent controlled was dealt excess damage this turn, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying and ward 2. Sort of.
So chump blocking, not a great idea for them.
Right.
And then lightning striking a 2/2 also, works out pretty well for you when you have Rith in play.
It's a weird thing to track, right? We don't normally track that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So this card's unreal.
Of course, it's a 5/5 flying ward 2 as well. So
yes.
Yeah, that's an A for Rith.
Can you go to combat, have them chump, then second main, play this, and go end step, make a 4/4?
Yeah.
Unreal. All right, A for Rith Liberated, A to A plus, depending for Rith Liberated Primeval. You do have to be able to cast it. That's like the only thing I can come up with.
In this set, that is not a difficult thing.
And it's not hard. Shauna Purifying Blade is green, white, blue for a 3/3 lifelink. This is a legendary human warrior at Mythic. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay X. If you do, draw X cards. X can't be greater than the amount of life you gained this turn. I played this card. It was sweet.
It's a cool little quest. I really like the design on this, where your quest is to have this survive combat, because you don't get to draw cards if this dies, but you also don't get to draw cards unless you gain life, and Shauna lets you gain life. So
right.
If you break it with like a tail swipe or a bite down, you can really go off. You can also gain life through other sources. Mm-hmm. And of course, combat tricks are just a good way to do it too. And as the opponent, because I've only played against this, you're always really nervous. You're like, do they have a way to get this through? Are they going to attack me? And then they pass the turn, don't attack. And you're like, oof, we got another turn to figure out a solution. Really cool card. Not bomb rare, but a good card.
Yeah, I have Shauna Purifying Blade at B+.
Yep, I agree.
Really cool card, I agree. Joda the Unifier is our last gold card. Joda costs Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, green, for a 5/5 legendary human wizard at Mythic rare, excuse me. Legendary creatures you control get +X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. Did they think that was going to be a thing just because there's the cycle of uncommon ones, maybe?
I think that this is largely designed for Commander games. Yeah.
Okay. Whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with a lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost, put the rest on the bottom in a random order.
So it's Legendary Cascade, where you have to play a legend and then you cascade into a cheaper legend.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool and stuff. But this is a Wooburg 5/5 for us mostly?
It's actually a 6/6 because its ability does count itself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That didn't sway me somehow.
I think this card's fine.
Do you really?
I mean, I don't know how often you've drafted domain decks, but it's just easily castable. Like, Wooburg isn't impossible. And
easily castable?
I think in most of the decks by about turn 6 or 7, you're probably going to be able to cast this if you want. And it's a 5 mana 6/6 that maybe pumps something else. And if you've got multiple other legends in your deck, it can do some kind of cool stuff. Look, I'm not saying it's a good card, but I'm saying in the domain deck, I think the card is playable.
Okay. And so what in order to hit though off the cascade, so like if you cast a 4 mana legendary after Joda's on the battlefield, then you need to have another legendary in your library that costs 3 or less.
Yeah, that part I think is not that likely to happen.
Okay.
But if you've got Joda and another legend in play, they're both getting +2/+2, and that part I think is fairly decent. So okay. I would give Joda a build around B, where if you're domain and you can get to this cost, I think it's usually worth playing. You usually have another legend or two.
Luis is a dreamer, ever an optimist. When I see this, I just see like really hard to cast vanilla 6/6 or something. Maybe you put it this way: unless somebody needs it for their collection, you're going to get the Joda that gets opened in your pod. So
that is most likely true. Yes.
If you want it, you can have it. That moves us to the artifact / colorless cards, and then there's a few lands. The first is, in this case, it's an artifact just called Timeless Lotus. It is 5 mana for a legendary artifact at Mythic Rare. And it says Timeless Lotus enters the battlefield tapped, but it taps to add Wooburg. It taps 5 mana, one of each color.
So I'm curious what your thoughts on Timeless Lotus are.
Well, I hate it, but it's really cool. Like, that's a really interesting design and kind of fun. But, generally speaking, I don't really want my mana ramp to A, start at 5, and B, that I can't use it straight away.
So generally speaking, I agree with you. Mm-hmm. However, I think Timeless Lotus is actually good in the domain decks.
Okay, go on.
So not every single domain deck, which further kind of narrows the scope. Mm-hmm. But when you have multiple Sunbathing Root Wallas, a couple ways to draw a card, whether that's like Joda's Codex or like Shadow Prophecies, and I am looking, Phyrexian Probe, like I am looking for these cards. Mm-hmm. Then Timeless Lotus, like you take a turn off, but then every other turn that you have that game, you're playing 3 spells. You're just kind of going nuts.
Sure.
I've had the card so far in 3 decks. It was bad in one of them and good in the other 2. And once I figured out that you really need a lot of late game mana sinks for it to be good, I think the card's playable. The other thing I think it's great, and I've been playing all best of 3 pretty much.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
In the domain mirror, the card is amazing.
I see. It just puts you so far ahead. You're both throwing haymakers
at each other. You're not getting pressured. If you play this on 5, they play whatever, dork they play. On your next turn, you play 2 5-drops or a 5 and a 6. And then the next turn, you play a 3 4 4. Like, you're just overwhelming them with card advantage. So I think Timeless Lotus is a build around B. I think it actually has merit.
That is awesome. I love that you found that. Yeah, because, the power level is undeniable. I've never seen a mana rock like this, right? It taps for 5 mana. Like, that's insane.
I'm not going to argue that casting this against blue-red spells or black-white aggro, probably not the way to go.
Right.
But I think that there's enough matchups that are good. This format has like real matchups. Like, you play against the wall deck, this is the kind of thing you need to go over the top. Like, it really does let you leverage like your whole deck against them pretty easily. And imagine if you have like repeatable activated abilities of any kind, like you really do end up kind of going nuts here. So I think Timeless Lotus has merit, but you got to know how to use it. And, hopefully that this will help give you an idea of the kind of deck that would want to use it.
Yeah, that's great. So a narrow build around grade for Timeless Lotus. Don't throw it in any deck. That's for sure. Next is Weatherlight Completed. And this is 2 mana for a 5/5 flying legendary artifact vehicle. It's a mythic. And it says, as long as Weatherlight Completed has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. And it says, whenever a creature you control dies, put a Phyresis counter on Weatherlight Completed, then draw a card if it has 7 or more Phyresis counters on it. If it doesn't, scry one. And of course, the notable thing here as well is there's no crew cost on this. Like,
nope.
You cannot jump in the Weatherlight Completed and make it into a 5/5 flyer. You have to get these Phyresis counters going on it.
Yeah, it's funny. This card looks kind of exciting, but then Sam Party really broke the comparison. He's like, this is just a bad quest for the Gravelord.
Oh, it is. That's really good.
So
that's funny.
I don't think this card is good. I've never seen it be a creature before, and I've seen it in play twice.
Yep. Same. Scrying 1 is fine, but man, having 4 things die is actually a lot.
And it's also just your things. It's not theirs.
Right.
It's one creature you control. And then if you finally get this going, your opponent just bounces or kills it. Like, it's just not that good. I think Weatherlight Completed is an F. I would avoid it.
I think so too. It's an F. Karn's Silex is next. This is 3 mana for a legendary artifact at Mythic Rare. It says, Karn's Silex enters the battlefield tapped. Players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. And it says you can pay X and tap it and exile Karn Silex. And if you do, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less. You can only activate this at sorcery speed. So kind of a weird mix of cards that we've seen from the past, right? It's got some Oblivion Stone. It's got a little, the ones from your vintage deck or whatever. you can't cast stuff or act, that kind of like lockdown type effect. Kind of weird.
Yeah, so the players can't pay life part is kind of whatever. That's more like flavor text against Phyrexians than it is a game text. But basically how this works is you play this tapped, and then your opponent knows on your next turn you can blow up the world. But if you've got the most expensive card, then you get to blow up everything but that card. So imagine you have a 4-mana card and they have all 3 or less mana cards, and it can do good work there. I mean, imagine you like play a Magnagoth Treefolk, the 4-mana 4/4 reach, and then you play this, and your opponent's like, do I put another creature on the board? Well, they're going to blow it up. And if they go too far, even with expensive things, you just blow everything up. But if they don't go far enough, then maybe you get the time to do what you want. So I like it in control decks. I think it's a B. It's a powerful card. It has the drawback of being a sweeper. You can't just top deck or play when you're dead because ETB is tapped. But the fact is, it is a powerful like modal sweeper that gives you some options.
At the cost of letting your opponent know that it's there.
Yeah, they know it's coming, but won't necessarily be able to do much about it.
Yeah, that's right. The only cards it shuts off, right, are the Planeswalker, the Ajani, and then the Defilers that we saw.
Yeah, I believe that.
I think those are the only instances in this set. So that is mostly flavor text, as you said. All right, so B for the control decks for Karn Silex. Golden Argosy is next. It's 4 mana for a 3/6 legendary vehicle at rare. Whenever Golden Argosy attacks, exile each creature that crewed it this turn. Return them to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you get to blink your creatures. And what's the crew cost? It's actually just right. It's 1.
This card's cool. One of the funny things is this would be a lot more busted in a normal set because this set's got a lot of kicker creatures. So it might feel like this set's got a lot of ETBs, but blinking a kicker creature doesn't actually accomplish anything.
Right.
That said, there are some notable exceptions to that. If you've got Wingmantle Chaplain, the 0/3 that makes a 1/1, that card, it's just insane. So you get to crew with at least 1 power worth of creature, but then a bunch of 0 power. And what you can do is you crew, let's say you crew Golden Argosy with Wingmantle Chaplain, 2 Academy Walls, and a random 2/2 you have in play. At the end of turn, they both come back, or all your creatures come back. Wingmantle Chaplain triggers and gets you 3 birds, but then it gets you 2 more birds as well.
It counts its own trigger and the other ones coming in triggers?
Yeah. So it's a busted combo with Wingmantle Chaplain. Another one, really good one to blink is Maria's Outrider, the 4/4 reach that love axes them, equal to domain.
For sure.
So those are some of the better combos I found. It's also a 3/6, which is pretty big.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you. Where you sit on a 4 mana 3/6 crew one?
I mean, a 4 mana 3/6 crew one is not exciting. I don't think I would be thrilled
to
put that
or
card
a C minus or something.
But the key with Golden Argosy is if you can just, even 1 combo is usually enough. And if you have multiple combos, you can, I mean, this card feels really unfair when it's comboing with these kinds of cards.
Yeah. I love it. That's a cool card. Like, that's just a neat card to have floating around in the set.
It's like a build around A. Like, it can be absurd with the right cards.
So build around A for Golden Argosy. Karn Living Legacy is our last colorless card. Karn is 4 mana for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker Karn Mythic. And it has 3 abilities. +1, create a tapped Power Stone token. It's an artifact with tap, add 1 colorless mana. This mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. So that's kind of a bummer. And then -1, pay any amount of mana. Look at that many cards from the top of your library, then put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Okay. And then -7 for the ultimate is you get an emblem with tap an untapped artifact you control. This emblem deals 1 damage to any target.
Karn is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. The +1's the disappointing thing, right? Like maybe it leads to the ultimate and that's cool, but it just doesn't really have a home in this set.
Well, it pays for the -1. You can pay any amount of mana. Yeah, because it's not casting a spell. You're just paying for an ability.
Oh, cool. Okay, that works then. I did not know. I had card in my deck and I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, reading the card explains the card.
Well, I didn't say that on there.
I did not say it on there. You can also activate Sunbathing Root Wallow with it or Clockwork Drawbridge. Like you can use it for activated costs. And then there's basically two modes with Karn. You're almost always going to play Karn in +1 unless you have tons of mana.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next turn, you're either like, okay, I'm going to then -1 and pay 2 or 3 mana to try to get something to affect the board. Or if you've got the board locked up, you're just +1 again, -7, and I have 3 Power Stones that each shoot for 1.
Yeah, and that's really tough to beat. Yeah, and I mean, I was using it -1. I just paid 1 and just drew a card. Like if I needed lands and or spells, if it was like just give me a card, but I still wanted to be able to do something to affect the board that turn, you can just pay 1 and just draw a card.
Yeah. So again, I think Planeswalker designs that don't just protect themselves. This one does not. And it's powerful if you can kind of keep it in play for a little while. So I like B for Karn. It's the kind of card that there are some games where you really can just play this and your opponent just groans. Like I was playing this like blue-red spells deck that was a little on the controlling side, and my opponent played this on turn 4 when I left Essence Scatter up. And they +1'd it, and then on my next turn I just had to like tap out to play a Tolarian Serpent, which I was hoping to wait a few turns on and play for like 1 mana, but I had to play it for like 5 mana.
Oh, okay.
And then they like minus Karn, drew a card, played a good blocker, and it was just like kind of downhill from there. Like it's a good card in the right situation.
I think that's really cool because look, as a limited player, when you open up a Planeswalker, you are kind of hoping it's one of the ones that fits that baseline that we talked about before. But I like that they're finding other, like it does get a little repetitive to be like, hey, look, a Planeswalker that makes a creature or draws you a card and has a powerful ultimate, right? This one's different than that. And that's pretty cool. I like that. What grade do you give Card in Living Legacy? I feel like I need to ask you since apparently I didn't really understand what it did. And I just drew a bunch of cards off of it and was like, all right.
Yeah, I would give Karn a B. I think it's okay. It's kind of equivalent to a good card draw spell.
So I guess I did do it right.
If your deck wants a good card draw spell, this could be good. It also does reward you for playing for the board. Like I've seen this card be effective in like a red-white aggro deck where you play a creature on turn 2 and 3, your opponent's on the back foot, they play a wall, and you're like, now I'm going to play Karn and really punish you for not being able to attack me.
Yeah, because now you could go for the ultimate or just generate a bunch of advantage. I like that.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you need to decide the turn that you play it, kind of where you're going with it?
Unless it's late game, you're probably going to +1 it to start things off.
Okay.
So I usually end up doing that, and then on the next turn, I think a good rule of thumb is if you have a good play and they're not attacking Karn, you could just +1 it again, make your good play, and keep things going because the ultimate is by far the most threatening. If you -7 this with 3 Power Stones in play, you're going to win that game.
You're not going to lose this game. Yeah, totally.
If the turn you untap with it on 5 loyalty with a Power Stone, or maybe like 3 loyalty, they hit it with a 2/1 flyer. At that point, you got to think about cashing in just to get a card if you don't have a good play this turn. Like imagine you play Karn with no cards in hand, you +1, they can't attack it, they pass back. If your next turn you draw a land, I'm probably going to minus it and pay like 4 mana to just play something because +1ing it again really runs into your opponent playing something. Because remember, a lot of the common and uncommon removal spells hit Planeswalkers these days.
That's true. Yeah,
you can no longer sit with a Karn on 7 and be like, what are you going to do? They're going to like Rona's Vortex it or something.
Right, and then you're really bummed. Great design, really cool, interesting. Yeah, B for Karn Living Legacy. There's a few lands here. One of them is a cycle of sorts. It's the Pain lands. So there's blue, white, black, red. Is there a rhyme or reason here?
Yes, but you're going to think it's funny.
Okay, green, red, white, black, blue, red, and blue, green. What is there's 6?
3 allied and 3 enemy. But
okay.
The reason apparently it came in this order was influenced by the storyline because these all talk about locations. Sheevan Reef, Adarkar Wastes. Some of the locations of the lands didn't exist at the time of this set, so they're going to put them in the next set once they did, or rather other way around. They didn't exist in the Brothers War, so the Brothers War is going to have some that they couldn't have there, so they had to put all 6 here.
All right, I respect it.
And I guess Sheevan Reef came in because they needed it for constructed, but. The funny thing about this rare cycle of Pain lands, they all tap for a colorless or 2 different colors, and you take a damage when you tap for one of the colors. Mm-hmm. They're worse than the common lands.
They really are.
So you should take, the blue-white common tap land over Adarkar Wastes basically every time.
Yes, you should. So, yeah, these are actually just not that great in this set. Yeah, they're totally
they're fine. Like you'll play them.
Yes, I play them, and I never pick them high enough to actually have them in my deck.
No, I mean they're not early picks, but they're all C's. You'll play them.
C. There's two more lands. One of them's called Plaza of Heroes. This is a land that taps for colorless. It's rare. It also has 3 other abilities. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, but only casting legendary spells. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control. So you can kind of get upgraded once you get a legend on the battlefield. Or you can pay 3 mana, tap it, and exile it to have target legendary creature gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn.
Basically, I wouldn't play this until I had a bunch of legends, because letting your land sack to save one of your legends is pretty good.
It is.
Like that can be strong. But I think that looking back and deciding, can I afford a colorless land, that's a little trickier,
Yeah, I would say I can't, generally speaking. Like, I get it once you get the train rolling or if you have enough legends, but I would just give Plaza of Heroes like a build around C or C+. Like, that does things if you've got 5 legends in your deck. It's just not very common that you'll have that. Thran Portal's the last one. It is a gate. It is rare, and it says it enters a battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. As Thran Portal enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. Thran Portal is the chosen type in addition to its other types, and mana abilities of Thran Portal cost an additional 1 life to activate.
Absolute garbage. Do not play this card.
So it becomes the basic that you want, but it's a pain basic?
There's no way to tap this for mana without paying a life.
Yeah.
You just can't put that card in your deck.
No, it only taps for 1 color.
Yeah, if this is your second land, like a 2 land with this, you're just, all right, I'm going to lose 6 life this game to my land.
Right.
Not good. So F for Thran Portal, and I really don't like it.
All right. That's it. There we go. I see what you were talking about, Luis. There is a good amount. There's some really good all-stars in here, some very interesting and cool things. I really like Golden Argosy. Karn was really cool. Rith is super, super powerful, interesting stuff. I really like Solkanar the Tainted as a design. Like, there's just some really neat stuff. And then there is, a decent number of blocks of text that are like, what was this supposed to be referencing? It probably isn't anything in this limited format. So kind of hit or miss as far as that goes, but some cool stuff. Overall, a weaker pool of rares than we've come used to, right?
For sure. I mean, just the fact that the gold rares, where usually that's a lot of where the best rares are hiding, has a lot of them basically vanilla creatures, which I still can't really get over. It's just, it feels kind of bad to see all these text box heavy impact light cards that just don't do anything for limited.
Yeah, those have an outsized impact because you get excited about them and then go, wait, what? And, realize it doesn't do anything. All right, well, that's going to do it for the rare and mythic rare set review here for Dominaria United. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. We want to thank our sponsors, Channel Fireball and FTX, for their support of the show. If you want to find anything related to the show, you can go to lrcast.com. You'll find every episode of the podcast that you can listen to, download, whatever. You also can see links on the front of the website to any of our social media or streams or anything like that. It's all there at lrcast.com. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
All right. So we've had the our rares good for limited discourse before, right? You got Ben S., who they literally convinced themselves to draft at the store in Florida by removing all the rares as soon as you open the pack and drafting from there.
Right.
And then you've got, sets like Fate Reforged or Crimson Vow that just have ridiculous rare after ridiculous rare just stacked on top of each other. So first of all, where do you fall on the rare spectrum? Like, do you like there being a lot of rares that are good? Do you, like you said, this set's a little light. Would you rather the set be more like this, even lighter, or heavier on good rares?
I like it to be a little lighter, but I do like to have powerful, exciting, and unique cards that you can open. I think it makes the draft portion more interesting. And I also think that they serve a function of allowing you to get out of a tough position sometimes. That's why I really like the rares that help stabilize a board and can help somebody make a comeback, because I find that some of the most exciting things about Magic are when you're behind, where a lot of games tend to reward resource, pooling of resources and it make it almost impossible to make a comeback. And rares can have a view on that. But the thing I really like are when the common removal spells answer most of the rares. That's the dividing line for me.
So let's try to use some comparisons here to figure out like what are the kind of ideal rares for you in terms of power level? Because there's two things going on. There's how good are like the best rares and how many good or better rares are there? Because I feel like these get a little conflated in the argument where some people say, hey, this set doesn't have enough good rares. Some people say this set has too many great rares. But those aren't even the same thing. Because, for example, I believe that you would say Glorybringer's too much.
Glorybringer's too much, yes.
And at rare specifically in Amonkhet, that's the 5 mana 4/4 haste dragon that when it attacks kills one of their creatures. Like,
yes.
It's a completely absurd card. And then, of course, you've got the Hall of Fame. You've got Pack Rat. You've got, Umezawa's GTA cards that just shouldn't come close to a limited game. They do everything Ben really does not like about these, which is they, make it so the rest of the game doesn't matter, just they matter. And Pack Rat even starts on turn 2. And
I believe that those harm the format that they're in.
Right. But then rares that are too weak are also not that interesting, right? You don't like the, 4 mana 4/4 or Errant Street Artist, the 1 mana 0/3 Flash Defender haste that could copy copied spells But on the other hand, what do you feel about, say, Dreadfeast Demon, the 7 mana 6/6, where you could sack a non-demon to make a copy of it at the end of your turn?
I'm a little more forgiving of 7 mana, but that felt too good to me too.
Okay, so you got the Defilers. So I assume you're fine with like the white Defiler and the red Defiler and the black Defiler, but what about the blue and green ones? I mean, the green one's by far the best. Is that over the line? Would you on the scale, would you rather rares be weaker than that or better than that?
Weaker.
Or at that power level? Okay,
weaker than the green Defiler, yeah.
So even with just the Defilers, are you okay with all the rest of them?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of narrowing in here.
Those are starting to get there, yeah.
What about something like Furio's Retribution, the white-black saga that makes a 4/4 and then lets your angels tap to kill something and then gives angels double strike?
Did that one make an angel too?
Yeah, the first chapters make an angel. So it's 4 mana 4/4 flying angel. Next turn it can tap to kill something. Next turn has double strike.
Too good.
Too good. Okay, so kind of the line for you is if it's an efficient rate creature that also promises a bunch of other value, like that's going to be, the game's going to revolve too much around that.
Yes.
But something like Evelyn the Covetous, the 5 mana 2/5 vampire that draws you 2 cards when you play it, that's totally fine. Even though it can dominate a game, that one's not to the same level.
Yeah, that one's pretty close to me, but I did find that card's okay. Yeah.
What about something on the cheaper side? Something like Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I mean, this card's ended up being one of the best cards in Kamigawa for Constructed. For limited, you get a 3 mana 2/2 that attacks and makes treasure. Then you get to Rummage, and then you get a Kiki-Jiki 2/2.
I actually felt like that was okay.
Okay, so that really efficient, but in the late game, your opponent plays this, you don't just be like, oh, I can't win.
Yes, and you can interact with either side of that card, I feel.
What about Fight Rigging? This is the enchantment that gets a +1/+1 counter every turn, and when you have a 7-power creature, you get to Hideaway.
That card was good, but still not over the line for me, because you needed creatures, like it made their removal better, etc.
Okay, I'm trying to look. What is your feeling on control magic effects?
They're too good for anything below rare.
But at rare, just like a 5 mana gain control of any creature enchantment, like Persuasion or something, would be okay. Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah, sure. Like you don't get an extra body out of it, then that's probably okay.
Okay, but and sweepers, I think generally I feel like you've been fine with. So like,
yep.
Straight up Wrath of God, 4 mana, you're like, okay, good card, but not a lot of gameplay to be had with this one.
Yeah, I don't think that they could print a sweeper that I wouldn't. I mean, they could come up with something obscene, but anything within room.
What about Hostile Takeover?
So it's like sweepers that leave you with good stuff and them without?
Yeah, it's closer to a Plague Wing than it is a...
I'm still okay with it. Those are still quite conditional, yeah.
I can't imagine getting much better than Hostile Takeover realistically, so I think that's about the peak of sweepers. Okay, going back to the big flyers thing, what about Goldspan Dragon?
No, Goldspan's okay.
So it's really good. It's a 4/4 flying haste, and it makes a treasure that sacks for 2, but if your opponent kills it, you're not left with unassailable amounts of value. Whereas something like Glorybringer or Green Defiler leaves behind too much to realistically overcome.
Exactly.
Okay, we're starting to get a better idea here of where we want to end up. What about when it comes to Planeswalkers? I would imagine something like Jaya is near the top of the acceptable range, where it's got a bunch of good abilities. It can protect itself. It can remove things. It can draw cards. And it's got a good rate. But it's also, if they have a 2/2 flyer in play or a 3/3, the card's not going to be absurd.
Yeah, Jaya's probably slightly over the line at 4 mana, but pretty close to being on it for me.
Right, but one of the older Planeswalkers was just like too much, The
ones that literally had the ability to kill one of your creatures and I still have a Planeswalker, or draw a card and I still have a Planeswalker, those were too much.
Okay.
But like Jaya doesn't have that.
What about the huge 7-mana bombs? Like, I know you said 7 mana is more forgiving, but you've got Dread Feast Demon. What about Koma, Cosmos Serpent? Like, when you played the card, the game did seem to end.
Yeah, I think those are generally okay. I know that like in that particular format, getting to 7 and even with the tough mana cost was attainable. But I think that I kind of feel like anything 7 mana or above is like, you kind of have, like Toxroll was pretty annoying, but I don't know. I kind of feel like as long as there is some way to interact or do anything, that they're okay. 7's a lot of mana. Like, you should have killed him by then.
Yeah, what about the more build-around-y stuff like Rabble Rousing, where if you have a bunch of creatures in play, the game kind of effectively ends, but if you only have 1 or 2 creatures in play, it might not do anything.
Yeah, I'm fine with those.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take this information. I'm going to make a list of what I think are approved rares and try to get the peak power level, but not over the line for every category of these rares, because I am curious. I think Ben's tolerance is much lower than yours. My tolerance is, I think, higher than both of yours. Uh-huh. But everyone has their own tolerance for what is acceptable. Whereas Ben probably wants everything to be 4 mana 3/3s. You're okay with a 5 mana 4/4 haste with an ability, as long as that ability isn't kill your creature or leave it.
Right, because the other one, that comes up, because that's a big category, and the other category is cards you can't interact with. Right.
Right. So 6 mana 6/6 lifelink hexproof is the kind of thing where you're like, what am I supposed to do about this?
Yes. I could literally flip my whole deck over and say, there's no combination of cards.
Right, like Sanctuary Guardian was just completely unbeatable.
Obscene.
All right. No, good information.
Are you going to come up with like a score for this?
I'm trying to find a unified score for
I love that.
The level of rares, whereas some people want like a 10, and Ben wants like probably a 1. Ben, anyone who takes rares out of the pack and decides to draft that way, you can't go lower on the scale than that.
No, you're an extremist if you do that.
That's literally, we don't want rares at all.
Right.
So I'm curious. I'm probably at like a 7, and you're probably at like a 5.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Interesting. All right, more research to be done, but we're making good headway.